Jackal Among Snakes. Author, Nemorosus. Chapter 41, Parting. Ro grunted as Argrave set down the quill, leaning over the parchment Argrave had been writing on. Annalise was on the other side of him, just as interested. That's the simple illusion spell, muffle. He pointed at another diagram. And there is how you translate, muffle, to an inscription. Once you will magic into it, the enchantment will be complete. This one will muffle sounds, naturally. Higher-ranked mages with larger magic pools like you mostly resist illusion magic, and plenty of enchantments or spells exist that help prevent people's senses from being twisted. Very prudent to use a spell I don't know to teach me enchanting. Quite the amazing teacher you are. The aged elf said sarcastically. Ro reached out and touched the paper without asking Argrave for permission. I feel it. I can put magic into this. He did so, and the inscription shone briefly before fading back into ordinary-looking paper. Argrave picked up a gold coin and dropped it onto the paper. It was near soundless. Ro watched this with brows furrowed. Argrave ripped the paper, and it was completely soundless. Ro stopped him. I get it. Stop wasting paper. You know how much this stuff is worth? Annalise picked up a piece of paper and moved away. Ro turned to Argrave. Then that is that. If I had known this matter was so simple, I might not have agreed to this trade. Yeah, sure. You would have definitely figured it out without me. Spare me the prideful nonsense, Argrave said dismissively. Now, I'll get you those illusion spellbooks adjust. Might be a pain, but I need druidic magic. Best way to scout and watch for enemies in the entire world. I'm glad you see that, Ro said with some measure of pride. He stepped a bit closer, locking gazes with Argrave and speaking quietly. So, that one is coming with you? Ro inquired. Argrave turned his head. Annalise was writing something. Argrave looked back to Ro, nodding. Yeah. Why? That's what I should be asking you, boy. I have responsibilities here, but I could give you a higher-ranked mage. I'm sure I could talk one of the A-rank mages into coming with you. A devastating force on that continent of Berenda, as far as I'm aware. Invaluable in whatever it is you're doing to stop he who would judge the gods, Ro said, shaking his head quickly. A loud poof came from behind Argrave, and he turned his head to spot a small mushroom cloud of smoke fading into nothingness. Annalise stepped back from a burning piece of paper. That's why I'm bringing her. Latent genius, that one. She has great talent, Argrave said, pointing with his thumb. Some enchantments are really quite useless, like that one you saw there. One-time uses that only destroy whatever it is they're written on. Others, like warding magic, are immeasurably useful. Trial and error, really. Ro walked forward slowly and jabbed his walking stick in Annalise's foot. She let out a little yelp and jumped back. Damn girl. Be more careful with paper, he reprimanded, picking up the smoldering piece of paper where the blackened remnants of an inscription could be vaguely seen. He cast a glance at Annalise. Besides, I need people of good character at my side. Argrave walked forward, shrugging. I trust Annalise and Gilliman more than any unknown element that is far stronger than me, magically speaking. Well, probably physically speaking, too. Ro cast some fire magic and finished burning the paper, scattering the ashes while wiping his hands off with his fur robes. Trust. You've known her for 3 days, maybe. Keep being so trusting, you'll end up on a spit with the Tenebrous Reaper pissing on your still warm body. What's with you and piss? Argrave shook his head. I haven't been wrong since you've met me. Never will be, if I can help it. You were wrong once, Ro said condescendingly. Told me to divine with animal guts, but that stripe, there's no validity to it. Might as well toss a coin in the air to decide. Tripe, Argrave repeated. Very nice pun. Disgusting. Ro waved his hand and started to move away. Hold a moment, Argrave stopped him. I might need some help carrying the books and navigating this place. Can you call some people? I'll get a list ready of the spells I need. A list? Ro frowned. You don't know the spells themselves, but you can make a list. I know their names and what they do. Otherwise, I'm out of luck. Argrave picked up a quill. Oh, also, if you could get one of your mages to cast Cure Disease on me. I think I caught another cold. Want to squash it before it gets worse. Right. One might think you're the patriarch the way you order me about. Savor it, it won't last. Ro shook his head. I'll get some of the young ones to do your bidding. The books will have to be carried to Kettler, Argrave called out as Ro walked away. This is the last thing I need before returning to Berenda. Argrave walked through the gates of Kettler with Annalise by his side. Ahead, one snow elf lugged a great chest over his shoulder. It was full of books, so it could not be light. The Vadaemon before them chose to carry it over his shoulder out of bravado. But now his expression was faded and tired after the walk from the city of Vaiden to Kettler. Are you going to say goodbye to your family? Argrave questioned his new traveling companion. Your grandmother excluded, of course. They live deeper inland, past Vaiden, Annalise said, amber eyes looking off to the side. And I do not think they would care overmuch, either. Your call. Filial piety isn't exactly my thing, either, Argrave said sympathetically. Annalise crossed her arms. Argrave had gathered that she had problems with her family. Some were blatant, like her grandmother. Others were only Argrave's assumptions, and so he would not press the matter. Near the docks to Kettler, Argrave could see a great gathering of snow elves. He craned his head to try and see what was happening, but unlike in Berenda, he was not always the tallest in crowds and could not see over the people easily. He walked a bit faster, his cane tapping against the ground until he moved around the person carrying the books. Once the docks were in sight, he saw battered and wounded Vadaimon being escorted off a ship in the far distance. At the center of the crowd, Argrave recognized one of the prominent snow elves in Vaiden speaking to Patriarch Draz. They were well prepared, my patriarch. There was nothing we could do, the one speaking to Draz said with a shrug. He was a big man, but his demeanor was withdrawn and battered. They had counters ready for our primary strategy. Even the druid Alcazar died. Patriarch Draz was much smaller, but his presence seemed large in comparison as he rebutted. I thought you said Alcazar used an A-rank spell before he died. If they were ready, that would never have happened. Argrave pushed past the crowd, using his cane to push some of the snow elves aside. People looked at him angrily before they recognized him, and then the crowd promptly made way for him. Patriarch Draz turned his head at Argrave's approach. You're back from the capital. His white eyes looked past Argrave to the snow elf lugging around the chest. And it seems you came back with something. Did you trick me? Argrave wanted to ask immediately, mind dwelling on Mateth. He had always liked Draz when playing Heroes of Berenda. Now, after what Annalise had told him, much of the goodwill he'd had was gone. Even still, Argrave knew he only had himself to blame. He knew Draz was not entirely forthcoming. He should have prepared for that. Was looking for a piece of gold, but found a bag of silver, Argrave said with a shrug. Ro and I worked out a little deal. You can ask him for the details. Patriarch Draz's face remained stoic. Seems I understand, now, why you were so quick to give up trying to save that city. You had something in mind the whole time. Argrave tried to keep his expression passive, but he was undeniably surprised and hopeful. Meaning? Patriarch Draz crossed his arms and walked closer. I'll have to collect a more complete report for study, but the bulk of it was a high-ranking spellcaster. What few mages are still alive believe he used S-rank elemental magic. Your city remains in human hands, and I'll keep my word. S-rank magic? That narrows down the scope a lot. Excluding the unaffiliated mages, there's maybe 10 people in the Order of the Grey Owl capable of magic of that tier, and only 3 that use elemental magic. If Duke Enrico placed a lot of value on my words, he might have called in a favor. Argrave's head spun, but he could think of nothing. His breathing threatened to spiral out of control as Draz's words set in. Mateth had not fallen. Argrave had been worried his actions might have prolonged the battle, ultimately worsening the result. Instead, Mateth never fell at all. He clenched his hand tightly against the cane in his hand. The unknowns of what had happened still wore at his conscience. Just because the city had not fallen did not mean there were no damages or loss of life. We left it to fate, Argrave said after pausing for a long time. Like we agreed, right? With this occurrence, Argrave's growing thoughts became confirmed. The world had already shifted far beyond its normal course. Perhaps it was immeasurably naive to think the world would be constant as it was in a video game. He stuck with what he knew, and though his knowledge had been immeasurably helpful, it wouldn't be enough going forward. Though the variables would remain the same, the equation would be different. Argrave would need to be more flexible and predictive. One failure could cost him his life, or indeed everyone's life. That was what a bronze hand mirror in his pocket told him, symbolically. Draz said with a nod. I've prepared a ship to send you back, along with an escort. Escort? Argrave probed. That necessary? You can row the ship yourself, Draz posited. Might make those wrists a little thicker, but I think you'll just never leave the docks. Hey, Argrave protested defensively, cradling his wrists beneath his clothes. Wrist thickness is about bones, not muscles. Believe me, if I could run more than 50 feet without coughing blood, I'd do so. Seeing Draz's expression turn somewhat contemptuous, he added, that's a metaphor. I think I can run 50 feet fine. Never tried it. Draz snorted. One questions why Erlebner would choose one so physically deficient, shall we say, to do his bidding. Some people have heart and brain, and those things are a lot more valuable than bulging muscles, Argrave said, waving to Draz. I don't exactly see you on the front lines. The one who had been speaking to Draz before Argrave arrived interrupted, saying, show some respect for the Patriarch. Chief Leiden. If I found him disrespectful, I would make that known, Draz reprimanded immediately. Go take care of the remainder of the vanguard that made it back. Leiden grit his teeth but could only turn away and leave. Argrave turned his head as Annalise and the luggage carrier caught up. The man put down the chest, and a cloud of white burst up into the air as snow scattered from its weight. You should leave soon. Snow is coming, Draz said. He turned his head to some of the guards nearby. Frant, get those daggers I had made. Yes, Patriarch, the elf responded, running off. And the Patriarch reached into his armor, and then pulled out a piece of paper. The draft of the contract. Peruse it for yourself, he offered. A draft? I'm sure your best wizard will be furious. Ro talked about how expensive paper was, Argrave commented, but took the paper. He read through it. Seems fine, barring the mention of my ties to Erlebner. Argrave finished with special emphasis. You crazy? In Berenda, they have an established pantheon. Ancient gods are a no-go. Don't want the world to know how my skin looks when it's being burnt at the stake. HMPH. Dries snorted. Such a backwards people. He took the paper back. I'll amend it, then. For now. Dries turned back to where the elf he'd sent away was just returning. He brought a wooden case and offered it to Dries deferentially. The patriarch took it and opened it up. Argrave craned his head to see what was inside, but then Dries flipped it around, showing it to Argrave. Some of my mages have these ebonite daggers. A lot quicker to swing than an axe, but they offer little range. I thought I might give you some. They suit you best, I think. Sell them if you want. Not my business what you do with a gift. Argrave reached out. These are nice. He took one. It had a dark wooden handle, like mahogany, and felt comfortable in his hand. He examined the blade, and found it looked plenty sharp. Then again, he knew nothing of knives or swords or any weapon. While you're gone, I'll ensure the warrior's blood stays roused in my men. When he who would judge the gods comes, we'll be ready for it. I won't lead my tribe to its death. There is more I need to do after this. As such, we'll make this a crushing victory, Dries said decisively. A crushing victory? Might a bit easier had you not wasted lives on an invasion you planned to cease anyway, Argrave chided. Dries narrowed his eyes. You didn't protest. We left it to fate. Things were already in motion by the time we spoke. No, you never planned to allow me to protest. Annalise looked at Argrave warily as he used her conjecture to confront Dries. Dries pushed his tongue against his cheek as he thought of his response. I'll admit it, he nodded. Bad start for a partnership if one can't be straight with the other from the get-go. Argrave put the knife back in the crate and stepped forward. He was a fair bit taller than Dries. All those lives lost, and all you achieved is making the people of Berenda hate the snow elves a little more. I'm told since you conquered the tribes, the population has doubled. You undid a lot of that today. Some of the Vadiman warriors grew tense as Argrave grew closer. Dries stared up, smiling. The first attack. A failure. Argrave nodded. Might want to rethink that dream of yours. Instead of leading your people to glory, you led them to death. There is glory in death, Dries said calmly. You say that standing on your own soil with unblooded hands. Argrave looked around. You've done enough good. Just prepare for Gerektik Kiet. Don't get cocky. This thing is never easy, he cautioned, voice low. Patriarch Dries thought of his response for a long time. Eventually, the tension faded from his face, and he nodded. Be well. Give Glimmin my love. He held out his hand. Argrave shook his hand. I will, to both. He looked back to Annalise. Let's be off, then. Chapter 42, Parade of Steel. Nicoletta sat by her father's bedside, staring down at his chest as it rose and fell. His injuries were healed, leaving not even a scar, and his breathing was steady and unlabored. Still, he refused to awaken. It's been 2 days, Master Castro. Can you not awaken him yet? Nicoletta said, trying to keep her tone polite, but finding it difficult to do so in light of her worry. The old Tower Master stood beside her, watching the Duke Enrico. As I told you, the spell to do so would be very costly. I would not leave myself fully drained of magic with the possibility of a recurring attack. I understand your concern, young Lady Montesai, but your father is in no immediate danger. Who? Nicoletta sighed, crossing her arms and leaning against her knees. People in comas get brain damage sometimes, right? What if that happens? What did I say? Castro asked, then repeated, your father is in no immediate danger. You're right, she said, lifting her head up. You're right. You would know best. I don't even know how to begin to thank you, Tower Master. How did you even find out about the invasion? Castro shook his head. It was happenstance I came here. I was looking for a promising acolyte. Your wyvern. I never intended to. She muttered. You sacrificed much for Mateth. I helped of my own accord. If one places their hand in troubled waters, should they rage when their hand is bit? Such is the action of a child, not a man as old as me. The Tower Master smiled. My grey owl. I cannot say I am unbothered by the loss, but when you lend something to someone unversed in how to use it properly, you cannot expect them to be a master. He had been by my side for 70 years. Everything dies, eventually. House Montesai's honor demands we repay this debt, Nicoletta answered firmly. I know, and I do not doubt your house's honor. Someday, that debt will be collected. I would prefer it to be at a time when neither will suffer further. Should I extort you while your seat of power lies in ruin, your father in a coma? One does not save a life expecting repayment, or at least, not a true savior. Castro dismissed with a shake of his head. Take your time, rebuild yourself and your city. Despite my sagging skin, I plan to live for a while yet. The Tower Master smiled warmly. And besides, that squadron of archers you called for helped greatly when they arrived. I had heard of this Ebonice through rumor alone, but it is indeed a great enemy to spellcasters. He retrieved an arrow of the black substance and held it to the light. It resembled obsidian somewhat but was much more translucent. You are a very good man, Master Castro, Nicoletta said, a great deal of tension draining from her shoulders. Nicoletta's mind had grown numb from the constant anxiety the past few days. These events helped her realize how powerless she truly was. With her father incapacitated, she was the regent of the Duchy of Montesai. There was great unrest within the capital Mateth. Refugees from the coastal villages swamped the city's gates, causing great disorder outside. Inside was little different. There were a few snow elves living within the city, and mobs formed, lynching several of them without provocation. It was a terrible thing, but the military force they had was too small to punish the people that carried out those acts. The guilt weighed at Nicoletta's mind daily. She lowered her head into her hands, rubbing her tired eyes. And atop all of that, Argrave was still absent. He could be dead. He could be a captive, tortured and starving. He could. Nicoletta frowned, recalling something the Tower Master had said. Master Castro, she said, straightening her back. That acolyte you were looking for. Was his name Argrave? Castro was taken aback. Yes, it was. You know of him? Are you serious? She stood. But then he... Her mind fell into disarray. Did he plan this all along? To have Master Castro come to help at the last minute? No. No, that's ridiculous. She shook her head. You know this boy, young Lady Montesai? The Tower Master questioned. I do, Nicoletta nodded. He's my cousin. He went to Vaiden to stop the invasion. What did you say? Castro asked with a strong hint of disbelief flavoring his tone. No, that's... A great bell rung, and Nicoletta's head snapped to attention. That's the watchman's bell, she said. The end of her sentence cut off with another ring. She stepped past the chair and quickly moved to the door, stepping outside into the estate's hallway. She rushed to a large bay window that overlooked the coast. A lone longship cut across the sea. The sight of it brought back terrible memories, and Nicoletta's breathing quickened. She looked out to the ocean beyond, but she saw no other ships. The flag bore atop the ship was white in way of the red flag with the black wheel in the center. She saw a lone figure on the figurehead of the ship. You should get off from there, Annalise called out, arms crossed as she stood behind Argrave within the ship's railings. She had donned a set of thick black leather robes lined with white fur more suitable for travel. Her long hair was bound in a half-crown braid. It flowed down all the way to her knees, swaying lightly in the wind. Argrave turned his head back from his spot standing atop the figurehead of the ship. He, too, wore a set of black leather robes, though with a cloak of white fur over his shoulders in way of lining. Please. I saw you riding in this same spot when you sailed to Baden. This was on the eve of battle, no less. He placed one hand on his hips in defiance. 3 daggers with black blades dangled on his leg. Always wanted to do this, anyway. Make believe I'm some kind of girl. A wave clashed into the ship and Argrave jerked about, one foot slipping off the side. He barely managed to regain his balance, and then he made a speedy retreat back onto the safety of the boat's railings. Annalise stared at him. She didn't smile much, but he had been around her long enough to recognize amusement in her eyes. All right, so maybe it isn't as dreamy as I thought it might be. Argrave sat against one of the railings, peering out to the coastline ahead. At least I don't get seasick. Always wondered if I would, but never really had the chance to test it. You're in good spirits. Is it because you're heading home? She sat on a chest tied to the ship's deck by some ropes. Home? I'm but a vagrant. I sold my home, became a nomad. Argrave pointed at the chest Annalise sat atop of. I'm in good spirits because of those books in there. Good harvest, all things considered. Plus these ebonite daggers. Argrave tapped the 3 on his leg. Dras is generous. No. I think that you're happy because Mateth did not fall. It went against your expectations. Argrave almost cracked at that moment. Annalise was half right. He was hopeful. He hoped that he would not return to see the people he'd become intimately acquainted with over the past months dead. The other half was a deep anxiety that the opposite might be true. Argrave stared at Annalise, clicking his tongue. All right, so maybe I am. It's a double-edged sword, though. Mateth is still standing, but it'll be harder for Vaiden to lend me any aid in my future plans. I'm still curious what you intend to do, exactly. You want to prepare the world for Girektik Kiat, but how? She gazed at him, amber eyes sparkling with curiosity. I don't like repeating myself especially, so we'll wait for Gilliman. Argrave shrugged. You still intend to bring him along? Why wouldn't I? Good fighter, quiet, loyal to a fault, although a bit bloodthirsty, I will admit. Argrave grabbed at his neck. He spotted a great number of knights moving across the coast towards their boat on foot. Look at that, Argrave said. Another welcoming party for my landing. I might get used to this. He held his hand out to form a spell matrix and he felt his vision spin. Soon enough, he was looking down at his body, immobile. Argrave was using druidic magic. He had bound a pigeon to himself and left it resting on the ship's sail. He commanded the pigeon he was seeing through to move and watched as it flew out across the ocean towards the host of knights. In the center of the knights, Nicoletta rode a horse. His brain shook at that moment, relieved from one great burden. He brought the bird back to the ship. Phew, Argrave said as his vision spun once more. Druidic magic will take some getting used to. The oars rushed back and forth, pushing them ever closer towards the beach. Eventually, when the ship grew close enough, the ship turned on its side, and a great deal of Vadimen pushed out a plank that landed on the beach. They stayed aboard, but Argrave and Annalise stood. One of the Vadimen cut the rope tying the chest down, and then hauled it, following close behind them. Argrave stepped onto the beach, holding his arms out. Feel that? Wind, untainted by snow or dread cold. A stiff autumn breeze is paradise compared to that winter wonderland. Ahead, The veritable parade of steel-armored knights approached them. One person broke free of the crowd and rushed forward, spurring a horse onward. Argrave suppressed a small little grin as he saw Nicoletta's obsidian-color hair waving about in the wind. Some knights tried to stop her, but none dared restrain the young lady Montesai by force. Argrave walked forward in long strides. Nicoletta grew nearer, and her caution overrode whatever it was that spurred her to move towards him. She slowed the horse and then dismounted, holding its reins as she stared. "Nicoletta, cousin, nice to see you in one piece," Argrave said, offering a handshake. Nicoletta stared at him with her dark pink eyes, breathing heavily without saying a word. Then, she rushed forward and veritably tackled Argrave, hands wrapped around his back. Argrave staggered a little but managed to keep his footing. His hands hovered awkwardly above her head, which was buried below his chest. "What are you? We're hugging." "Well, I certainly didn't." Argrave trailed off. He heard some sobbing noises, muffled beneath his clothes. "You're crying? Why are you crying?" Argrave turned his head to Annalise in panic. "Why is she crying?" Annalise only watched, offering no answer. Nicoletta head-butted him in the chest lightly. "Shut up, you bastard." Argrave frowned and hesitantly returned the embrace. He had never been good at hugs, but it was doubly awkward considering the height difference. He didn't want to get his clothes soaked in tears and snot. But he didn't wish to push her away, either. "It's been so damned hard," Nicoletta said. "Why don't you tell anyone what you're doing? Why do you go off on your own like that? You just leave me here with a pit in my stomach." Argrave didn't know what to say for a time. After a while, he opened his mouth and slowly said, "I mean, you've still got my clothes in the guest bedroom. Didn't I say you could take them out and stare at them when you miss me?" She started shaking again, and Argrave was worried he had made things worse. It took him a few seconds, but he recognized that she was laughing. She pushed away, looking up at him. "I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me," she began, wiping her face off. "The past few days, they've been unimaginably stressful. It all just exploded on you." She took a deep breath, regaining her composure. "I thought I might never see you again. Spent the whole time steeling myself for that. Maybe they'd find your corpse on a beach. Maybe you'd just never be heard from again. I thought the same about you." Argrave thought, but refrained from saying it. "PFFT." Argrave scoffed. "Me? Dead? Impossible. No rest for the wicked. That includes the long sleep." He surveyed his clothes where she'd wept, cleaning them off with water magic briefly. "It appears Mateth didn't fall, despite my fears." "What happened?" "The Tower Master Castro came atop a wyvern. With his help, we repelled the invaders, but the docks are, well, gone. My father is in a coma, at least for another couple days." She took a deep breath, as though it was difficult to say aloud. "Ultimately, we barely hung on, but that isn't important." "What in the God's name did you do?" "You're returning escorted." She eyed Annalise warily. "The Vadaimon won't trouble Berenda any longer, at least for another decade." Argrave retrieved a rolled-up paper from his pocket. "Here, a contract. Peace treaty, I guess, but they called it a contract." Nicoletta stared in mute shock, but eventually took the paper from his hand. Argrave's eyes stayed locked on the steadily approaching knights, marching on foot. He turned his head back to the longship. All those that had been rowing the longship stood at the edge, shields arrayed in a perfect line as they watched the approaching army. It was quite a terrifying sight. "It's over?" Nicoletta finally spoke. "Just like that. They're free to just come, ruin thousands of lives, and then leave as though nothing ever happened." Her eyes went to Annalise, and the snow elf kept her amber eyes steady, returning the gaze. Argrave's expression grew somber. "I can't change what's already happened. I did the best I could." The words felt hollow. He watched Nicoletta. He didn't need to be an empath to tell there was grief etched on her face, hardships, sorrows. Argrave had been fully prepared to let Vaiden seize Mateth. If not for chance, the person before him might be dead. All he had demonstrated was 2% indecision, 98% ineptitude. "Well, perhaps indecision is ineptitude," Argrave reasoned. "You're right. I can't complain to you," Nicoletta carried on, unaware of Argrave's thoughts. "I see your name. I see some strange word, Gerektig Kiet, and he who would judge the gods. I want you to explain to me what happened." "Explain to me what's happening," she said, rephrasing the tense. "I don't want to be left in the dark anymore." "Sure," Argrave agreed. "Long story, though. Might be tiresome." He looked back at the crowd. "Where's Mina?" "I don't see her around." "Nothing happened, did it?" he asked in concern. "Mina?" Nicoletta's face went red and she looked to the ground. Well, we haven't spoken in a while after she, huh?" Argrave asked eagerly, his joy at learning she was fine seeping into his speech. "Did she do something? Get a weight off her chest to her best friend? Confess something?" Nicoletta's head shot up to lock gazes with Argrave. She stepped closer, speaking quieter despite their distance from the host of knights ahead. "You knew about what she?" Argrave smiled. "Of course I knew. I gave her the push." Her eyes widened at his words. "Why would you do such a thing?" "It's against the teachings of the gods," she whispered insistently. "I've heard rumors of such things in aristocratic circles. Degenerates, deviants, They call these couples. People are dragged from their homes and stoned for this. Nicoletta's knights came to stop a fair distance away, keeping a wary eye on the Vadaman aboard the boat. Argrave conjured a ward to block their conversation. I imagine only the peasants face serious repercussions for such relationships. Such is the nature of a landed elite, Argrave commented. I've told no other soul. Even if people find out, you don't genuinely think your father would let you be hurt for this? I hope. You're his only child. You assume much about me to encourage my friend in this manner, she said angrily, voice unrestrained now that their conversation was blocked by magic. You were prepared to leave home because of your father's insistence to arrange a marriage for you, Argrave said poignantly. Heard about plenty of attempts by handsome nobles to court you in the Order of the Grey Owl, all of them for naught. I see the way you look at Mina. Above all, you don't even blink at this handsome face of mine. Even skinny, I'm quite a looker. Right, Annalise. Argrave turned his head. Annalise opened her mouth, thinking, and then shut it. Argrave smiled and turned back to Nicoletta. See? She agrees. Nicoletta's face was tight, but she did not rush to deny his words. Why would you want such a thing to happen? She struck at the heart of the matter. Doesn't benefit you. Is it because you have that inclination? If by that inclination, you mean being attracted to women, then yes, Argrave said with a snort, then considered her question further. In truth, the pairing had been done at whim when he was in a good mood. Granted, it was what he always chose in game, particularly because their ending was happiest. When they had been game characters, he had some attachment to them as just that. Now, though, Argrave spoke much slower than usual, saying the answer only as he came to it. Is it so strange to seek happiness for two friends? It'll be difficult, doubtless. I can't say people will accept it easily if at all, but I believe it's worth pursuing. Friends, is it? Nicoletta considered that. I have no idea what to think. I've been trying to avoid thinking about what she said. On the eve of a civil war, my father in a coma. Now is not the best time to be lost in matters like these. Your father is in a coma? Argrave pressed. He'll be fine, Master Castro assures me. My father will be awoken when the Tower Master's magic recovers sufficiently. Nicoletta let out a light sigh. Such a ridiculous situation. My father had you dead set as my marriage partner, and now you try and pair me with a woman. What? Really? Argrave asked immediately. When Nicoletta nodded in confirmation, Argrave started laughing. I'll have to refuse. I don't fancy children with oversized chins and the mental capacity of dogs. Argrave scratched his chin. Though, maybe this isn't so bad. I can think of a way to solve both of these matters of the heart. There is no matter of the heart, just what you've forced to happen, Nicoletta insisted. Sure. Argrave nodded, agreeing sarcastically. You said yourself you don't know what to think. Maybe I can give you some time to do so. First, let's walk and talk of what you asked me earlier, about Gerektik Kiet. Argrave snapped and pointed ahead. Oh, and have the Pride Parade ahead carry my luggage. They're heavy books, you see, and I'm far too weakened from the long journey. Chapter 43, Hierola. And after the Tomb Guardians shambled in on Barden, one of their arrows hit the palisades. I was knocked unconscious by the wood splinters, Argrave explained. Annalise here can tell you what happened afterwards. She carried me on her back and swam across the great blue ocean. She's dedicated like that, he finished, tapping the snow elf's elbow as they walked through the gates of the Montesi estate. Ahead, two knights carried a chest up through the estate's front door. Annalise did not seem to hear the exaggeration as she was observing everything around her with a great deal of interest. Though she feigned obliviousness to the hateful glances cast her way and the disparaging terms muttered in her direction, Argrave could tell they reached her and bothered her. You still haven't mentioned what Gerektik Kiet is, Nicoletta said, coming to a stop. I don't understand. You go alone to the heart of an invasion, and you manage to just talk them into setting aside arms? It's ridiculous. These things don't just happen. She shook her head, spreading her arms wide in disbelief at the situation. Hold on. Argrave held out his hand and conjured a D-rank ward spell around them. Soundproofing. So, talk. Nicoletta pointed, then crossed her arms. How did you do what you did? Well, much like how Annalise put aside the battle we were having to defeat the Metal Men, Patriarch Tras put aside the invasion for another matter. Argrave rested his hand atop the ebon ice daggers on his waist. Elaborate, Nicoletta demanded. Argrave scratched his chin. Not sure you'd believe me. I'll be the judge of that, she dismissed. I'm tired of you leaving me in the dark, damn it. Argrave chuckled. Never heard you curse. Guess I'm in the deep end now. He scratched the back of his head. Gerektik Kiet is a calamity. An ancient one, old as no one can remember. Shows up every millennium and again to try and put an end to the world. Argrave shrugged and shook his head. The kingdom of Vaskar is too young to have any records of it. It's, what, year 872 since its founding? What are you talking about? She asked, more confused than anything. I just told you. A god is going to descend to this mortal plane hell-bent on destruction. Wouldn't call him malicious, it's just his instincts. Malicious or not, I much prefer living, and no one else I can see is stepping up. Nicoletta shook her head, mouth agape in bewilderment. She might take you seriously if you acted serious, Annalise recommended. That's true, Argrave nodded. But, Nicoletta held her hand out to stop them from talking further. What exactly is going to happen? When is this going to happen? What is it? I think the world calamity should make things clear enough. A disaster, eh? Argrave waved his hand, searching for synonyms. An apocalypse, though it's a living thing rather than a force of nature. If you can call a god alive, that is. As for when this is going down, considering that now is near the end of autumn, a few years. I could probably give an exact date, but frankly I haven't looked at a calendar in many months. You're serious about this? Nicoletta sought to confirm. This isn't some tactic you used to convince the snow elves? No, Argrave shook his head. Everything I've done has been towards this end. The big bad evil takes precedence over mortal squabbles in my eye. The whole world will just stop. No more life, big empty wasteland, everyone dead. As far as I understand it, at least. There aren't any tales of what happens after Gerektig Kiat, unfortunately, so I can't confirm this. Annalise raised a hand to get attention. A millennia ago, my people took part in a great war on another continent outside of Berenda. The devastation wreaked is spoken of in many stories. Perhaps the only reason the people of Berenda do not know is because they were not affected. But now, he who would judge the gods is to appear on this continent, Annalise said, pointing to the ground. Nicoletta's face warped between emotions rapidly, and Argrave waited patiently. Eventually, she asked the question he had been waiting for. How do you know this? It's like I told you back in the Tower of the Grey Owl. Believe me or not, it doesn't matter. In time, the truth will be made clear for everyone. Dim echoes of Gerektig Kiat are already deeply rooted in this continent. This civil war wasn't fully man-made. The plague brewing in the northeast is unnatural, too. In time, genuine monsters will appear. Nicoletta absorbed the information. Why don't you want to say how you know this? That's for me to know, Argrave dismissed. You don't trust me, she accused. If people know the truth, I could be in danger. Argrave shrugged. I'll take no chances. I trust you with my life. But what I have to do is too important to muck up with my own personal biases. Annalise crossed her arms, watching passively. Nicoletta stared at him, her dark pink eyes shaking slightly. Eventually, she shook her head. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I don't get you. From the Order until now, I've never understood what you're aiming for. You speak nonsense half the time. I'm doing my duty, Argrave said simply, voice low. Until it's done, I have no other aim. Annalise studied his face with her amber eyes, and then turned away, looking out into the courtyard with arms crossed. What should I do, then? Nicoletta asked him, some resignation on her tone. Stay neutral in the civil war. Rebuild your forces. Build your strength. And, when the time comes, help. Argrave shrugged as though it was simple. All right. Nicoletta nodded. That's more or less what was going to happen anyway. If I know my father, I'll probably keep that mercenary, Melanie, contracted for a longer period. Melanie? Argrave frowned. Red hair, chains, big sword? Yes, Nicoletta confirmed. You know her? Argrave pursed his lips. One of the main characters is here. Huh. He slowly nodded. Yeah, I know her. She's done some work for the royal family. Don't give her too much responsibility. She works for the highest bidder. No morals. She'll kill you if anyone gives her a bigger pay. Okay, she nodded. I'll keep that in mind. All right, talk over. Argrave moved to dispel the magic, but Nicoletta grabbed his wrist. Wait. You spoke of how to deal with this matter of my father's intent to marry us. Argrave pulled his wrist free. Well, you'd have to trust me a good deal. After the talk we had, that might not be possible. She stared for a second, and then said, tell me first. Argrave rubbed his hands together. Way I see it, your father can send 30 proposals my way. As long as I never answer or even receive them, he'll be left waiting. I plan on leaving soon. More things to settle before the end times, you see. Once Castro helps Duke Enrico out of his coma, you tell him that I was amenable to a betrothal. Set his heart on this match, only for me to leave him in a lurch for a long while. If you leave him waiting too long, he might just change his mind, Nicoletta argued. You ever consider dear old dad might be fostering some ambitions for the throne? He'll persist for a while, Argrave posited. Nicoletta was taken aback by that, and she stared at the ground. Even still, it's not a permanent solution. You're smart. Probably. You can find one in the time I give you. What, you want me to do everything for you? Argrave spread his arms out and shrugged. Of course, you have to trust I won't answer any of his proposals. Might be you could find someone else for the task. Of course. Nicoletta's gaze flitted between the ground and his face. Eventually, she held out her hand. If there's one thing I trust, it's that you don't wish to marry me. She cast a brief glance at Annalise. That sounds like depressing self-deprecation, but you're right. Argrave took her hand and shook it. Argrave, Annalise, and Nicoletta walked down the hall of the Montessori estate. Ahead, the two knights opened the door to Argrave's old guest bedroom, entering sideways. Argrave followed close behind. He failed to duck, though, and slammed his head against the doorframe. For the love of... Argrave trailed off. Nicoletta hid a laugh behind her hand. Don't laugh, he demanded, pointing at her. I got used to the big door frames at Veiden. Not my fault this estate was made for midgets. You're 7 feet tall. You're the abnormal one, she rebutted. I prefer the term special, Argrave said, ducking and entering the room he'd stayed at briefly in Mateth. Annalise and Nicoletta followed. Should I prepare your friend Annalise a room, or do you? Nicoletta asked. Won't be staying long enough to sleep, Argrave answered. Have to get Gulliman, and then do some other things. The two knights set down Argrave's chest of books beside the already formidable stack he'd collected in his guest room at House Montesi's estate. They cast a glance at Annalise as they left and shut the door behind them with a slam. All right, where's my money? Argrave got to business. Nicoletta was taken aback. From the auction of Foamspire? No, you think I stopped this invasion for free? Argrave said sarcastically. I'm kidding. Yes, of course. From the auction. I have it. She nodded. The bidder paid in rose gold magic coins, 214 of them. We probably could have got a lot more if we'd gone through different channels, but no matter. I stored them in the vault here at the estate. Around 430,000 gold. Not bad. Damned fortune compared to what I usually have so early in there. Well, never mind. Argrave nodded. You can keep 50 of those. Mateth will need a lot of money to repair, and with your docks gone, commerce won't exactly be easy. Argrave had planned this for some time. It felt a small drop in the bucket of guilt weighing him down, but it was a start. Mateth had survived by chance. He alone had been inadequate. His presence had changed events, but it had not been deliberate or measured. That would need to change. Nicoletta was startled. She spoke slowly and delicately, surprise marking her face. Argrave, that's a fair bit of money. Argrave shrugged casually, walking and sitting down on his bed. Consider it a service fee. And an investment. Never could have sold a thing on the Beretta Troop auction without your help. Even still, I can't take such a generous sum without offering anything in return. We have a well-enchanted lockbox in the vault. I'll store the coins in there, give it to you. I'm not the type to refuse free stuff. Argrave nodded, falling back onto his bed. Go ahead. Nicoletta walked towards the door. I will, then. Thank you for your help with this situation regarding my father. Sure, sure. Argrave called out between a yawn as he relaxed on the bed. Not like I'm doing much. You're the one that has to do the lying. I'm just offering my name. Nicoletta stayed silent for a few seconds, shaking her head. Whatever. She stepped to the door, opening it. Another thing. The Tower Master Castro is coming here. He came here looking for you, after all. What? Argrave sat up quickly. You're playing with me. He'll be by shortly. I have to go. Ducal matters, she explained, shutting the door before Argrave could say anything more. You could have said something earlier. He shouted to little effect. Argrave sat, mouth agape as he stared at the door. His brows furrowed and he brought a hand to his mouth, expression pensive. Damn, she boomed me. It seems you are an oddity even among your own people. Annalise stepped closer. Your friend seems nice. And she trusts you. Why didn't you tell her about Turlubin? Don't think that would go over well, Argrave cautioned. Barring my association with a heretical god, there's no need to say more than necessary. Let Nicoletta stay safe and happy, devoting her time towards rebuilding Mateth. Once Gerektig Kiet starts making his move, I can start bringing people over to my side. Until then, this is my problem. Well, our problem, Argrave conceded. Annalise mulled over his words. You do much for your friends, she finally said. Yeah, I'm a saint, I know. Argrave nodded sarcastically, and then pointed. Listen, a big fish is about to swim by. He's got his eye on me, though why I still don't know. That said, I'm not one to pass up an opportunity. If a grifter sees a high roller, he's got to peddle his wares. A grifter? Annalise raised her brow. Argrave stood, moving to the pile of books and sorting through them. If you're good at improv, feel free to contribute. Some of these books are pretty useless to me. Germinate, expand roots, feel needs. Of course, Castro needs to think they're the best druidic spells. What makes one spell better than another? I don't know, Mabe. A knock interrupted Argrave's response, and he froze for a second. He glanced at the mirror in the room, fixing his appearance quickly. With a final readjustment of the white fur coat over his shoulders, he moved to the door and pulled it open. There, a short old man waited. He looked perhaps 60. It was difficult to imagine he was near 200. Oh, Castro said. You must be Argrave of Vasca. A pleasure to meet you. You are quite the tall one, he commented. This old man may hurt his neck looking so high up. Chapter 44, Used Spellbook Salesman. Oh, Castro said. You must be Argrave of Vasca. A pleasure to meet you. You are quite the tall one, he commented. This old man may hurt his neck looking so high up. Tower Master Castro stood waiting in front of Argrave's door patiently. He was like a much more compact version of Ro the Righteous in that both were old, bald men. Evidently that compaction had removed the terrible attitude, for Ro would never smile so warmly. Just Argrave, no Vasca, Argrave corrected. And you're Castro, Master of the Order of the Grey Owl, Argrave continued quickly. Nicoletta informed me you were looking for me. Beyond that, I don't know much. Although I have an inkling, I'm not quite sure. Why don't you come in? I have no refreshments on hand, but you can at least sit. Argrave stood aside and gestured to the table in the corner of the room. Castro nodded. Please and thank you. He entered the room, noticing Annalise. "Hello, young lady, who might you be?" "This is Annalise, a friend of mine, a spellcaster from Veiden, and my traveling companion," Argrave introduced her, walking to the table and pulling the chair back for the Tower Master. He offered the other chair to Annalise, and then sat down himself in the third. Castro was watching his every move. Argrave could practically hear the gears turning in the man's head as they put an image of his personality together. "You have quite the large magic pool. I see you're diligent with your training." Argrave was uneasy at the man's comment. A-rank mages were more than mere humans. Castro could perceive magic by sight alone. "Indeed I am," confirmed Argrave as he adjusted in the chair. "So," Argrave began, putting his hands on the table and entwining them. "I'm very curious why a big shot like yourself has come to visit little old me." "I have an idea, but at the risk of appearing foolish should I be wrong, I'll wait to hear your answer." "You are very businesslike." "I see," answered Castro, smiling. "I did not have time to ask her much, but Nicoletta seemed fond of you, and from what I have seen in her time as regent of the dukedom, she is a person of good character." Argrave glanced at Annalise, but her expression was as passive as ever. "Your point being?" "Nothing, forgive me." Old men tend to ramble. Perhaps it's because they like the sound of their own voice, Castro dismissed, letting out a wheezing chuckle. Though Argrave considered mentioning Castro's true age, he kept quiet, not wishing to unnerve the man. "To the point, then." Castro leaned in slightly. "Many of the more research-oriented high wizards of the Order have taken a great deal of interest in the thesis you submitted. If it were to move from theory to practice, what you call blood infusion has the potential to change the landscape of all magic." "I know," Argrave nodded. "I left the thesis unfinished for that reason," he said. Argrave could veritably smell the bait he'd hooked to his fishing line. It would be more than enough for this big fish, he hoped. Castro stared at Argrave's face for a moment, his expression slowly shifting. "You mean to say that you left out the completed theory?" "Indeed." Argrave nodded, taking his hands off the table and leaning back into the chair with arms crossed. "Why? The mages at the Order are already discussing bestowing a grand reward upon you, and that figure might be larger." "I should work for nothing? Let others feast on the fruit of my labor?" Argrave held his arms wide. "It's complete, but as a C-rank mage, I can't yet prove it. If I give it all to them, another will find what I toil to get. Perhaps it's selfish, but I want all of the credit." The old man Castro nodded, considering Argrave's words. "It is not unusual for a spellcaster to take pride and be possessive of their own work, but the Order of the Grey Owl is supposed to be beyond that, young man." He tapped his finger on the table. "And further, by saying that it's impossible as a C-rank mage, you've greatly narrowed the direction of further research," Castro disclosed provocatively. Argrave grinned. "I only mentioned it because I have a solid grasp of your character. 120 years ago, it was you that instituted measures to reduce the political influence of the Order of the Grey Owl, trying to turn it into a politically neutral entity. You're an honorable, just man. Your defense of Mateth proves as much." The Castro that Argrave knew was just a tired old man who wanted to study magic and be happy. Indeed, if a player rose high enough in the Order, Castro would simply step down as Tower Master, leaving it to the player. Such a man would not steal and develop research from a young wizard. "I'm flattered that you think so highly of me," the Tower Master said, though it had a casualness that betrayed he was not truly affected by the praise. He'd probably seen many sycophants in his day. "I am, however, quite mindful of the many privileges offered to me as a member of the Order of the Grey Owl," Argrave proceeded tactfully. "Once I am capable of proving what I preach, I'll naturally turn in a more completed version of my theory. If I die before then, you can do as you please with it." "That is good," Castro said with a nod and a smile. Argrave carried on quickly. "But that isn't all, naturally. Do you know about druidic magic, Tower Master?" "The magic of the snow elves?" Castro half asked, half stated. "You know of it," Argrave pointed. "Good." Argrave stood, moving to the chest of books and picking up some of the ones that he'd set aside that were useless. He took one and walked back to the table, placing it before Castro. "The books with me are all druidic magic," Argrave said grandly. "Not half-torn manuscripts or spells wrested from tortured snow elves. Fully documented druidic magic." Castro perked up at that, eyebrows raised in surprise. "How did you manage that?" "Argrave is a valuable friend of the Veidemon," Annalise interjected, finally breaking her silence. Argrave smiled as he caught on to what she was doing. Our people were willing to offer these books in trade. By naming him a friend to the Veidemon, Argrave's value would be further amplified in the eyes of the Tower Master. Having importance and prestige in the Order would enable mobility and leeway in future encounters. "In return, I promised to deliver some illusion spellbooks by boat at just a small price to pay for bringing a new field of magic to the Order, by my estimation," Argrave tagged on to Annalise's words without missing a beat. "Can that be arranged, Master Castro?" Argrave had been planning to get the illusion books through other means, but this was perfect for his needs. Castro straightened his back, thinking the snow elves were just invading. Now they wish to trade? Their leader and I had some words, Argrave said. "Whole thing? Big misunderstanding." "This trade is a peace offering of sorts, an exchange of knowledge," Argrave said while nodding remorsefully. "So? Can I expect those books at just Castro paused, being placed on the spot so abruptly. I suppose, if those books are genuine, it is indeed a worthy trade. Argrave put his finger on the book at the table and sat back down. Peruse the book, determine its value for yourself. Castro picked up the book. Argrave carried on as the Tower Master examined the tome. Druidic magic is like necromancy in that it involves the soul but differs in the approach taken. Dead souls cannot be touched. Instead, the druid tries to bond and form a connection with the natural beings in the world. Some spells form a link between the caster and the animal that persists for years. Other spells might temporarily connect with a less animate soul, plant life, for instance. A very fascinating and useful school of magic, in my opinion. I see, Castro half answered, distracted reading the spellbook. Intriguing. For now, I'll give you all the ones that I've mastered. Argrave lied. He intended to give away only the useless ones. Once he mastered the ones he needed, he would give them all up. Eventually, I'll bring them all to the Order. This is a tremendous find, young man. Castro closed the book and looked at Argrave. This meeting was far beyond my expectations. Each of these books are near priceless to the Order. Argrave smiled. He's talking me up like a nouveau riche hooked on some shabby art, he dialogued internally. Now's the time to reel in the line. All I ask is that, when I become a B-rank wizard, the process for becoming a high wizard is expedited, and further, I hope you can give me permission to take any spellbooks from the tower's library. Castro lowered his head, a faint expression of amusement on his face. When you become a B-rank wizard, few reach that milestone. Very few people are me. Only one, in fact, Argrave declared confidently. The Tower Master looked at the book on the table, lost in thought. Eventually, he turned his eyes to Argrave. Those things are something I can do. He held out a hand. I'll send word to the libraries that you're to be given rights to take whichever books you so please. I'll prepare those spellbooks at Just, though I suspect you'll need to coordinate the delivery to these. Vadaimon, he finished respectfully. Argrave bit his lip to stop himself from smiling. He'd earned a card that few could ever hold: free access to all magical resources of the Order. Money was no obstacle after Foamspire, but some things could not be obtained with money. Order spellbooks were one such thing. Another thing. My friend here. He pointed to Annalise, not yet shaking Castro's hand. I'd like to make her a wizard of the Order. She's already C-rank in multiple schools, and she's been there longer than I have. Annalise was surprised, but she reined in her shock quickly. The Tower Master smiled a little. Interesting. She would be the first snow elf in our Order, though not the first elf. Castro scratched the top of his head. I would agree, but it isn't something I alone can decide. A special induction at the rank of wizard, not common. I will bring it to my council. I can promise to be a proponent, but nothing more. Castro smiled. Anything else I can do for you, or can we finally shake hands? He held out his hand once more. Argrave shook his hand quickly. A wonderful meeting, Master Castro. Castro walked away from Argrave's room with a faint smile about his face. He had considered this trip to be a disaster before that meeting. That wyvern had been a gift from the southern tribes of the desert beyond the Margrave's territory, and it had died. Few others in Vasca had such a thing, and the majority were nobility or royalty. Fortunately, the purpose of his trip greatly surprised him. Impressive that he could stop the Vadaimon from invading. Perhaps he was doing the bidding of the royal family. But being given a task and doing it right still requires considerable competence. He looked down at the book in his arms. Still absolutely worthless as a disciple. He'll ring me like a towel until he's dead, or I am far too shameless. That one. Castro shook his head. In the many years of his life, he had learned that some people simply cannot tolerate guidance. Argrave was, from his insights, one such person. The royal bastard has his own plans for everything, and while he'd take what comes with an open hand, he'd never rely on anyone except himself. His eyes are haunted. Far too much sorrow for a boy his age. Perhaps it's the family. Castro mused, slowing his walk. Way I see it, he'll work himself to greatness or death. All depends on the people standing by his side, I suppose. It's best he distances himself from Vasca. Castro rubbed his eyes. Me, thinking about politics. This week has been far too exciting. Chapter 45, Farewells. Argrave scattered bread across the streets, watching as the pigeons dropped down and chewed on it without care for the abundance of people walking about. He looked one in the eye, and then his hand shone with a spell matrix. Argrave felt a bizarre sensation in his chest that felt as though some carbonated liquid was bubbling about near his heart. After the spell finished, the bird flew up and joined a flock of 6 unprompted. They acted just as ordinary birds, but Argrave felt there was a certain connection between the 6 of them, distinctly separate from the rest of the animals. They moved together, acted together, and never strayed too far from Argrave's sight. You should stop here, Annalise said. Bonding with too many creatures can change your behavior, especially if they're all of the same species. Argrave stood. 6 birds. It should be fine as a temporary druidic partner. Mostly for scouting, anyway. I'm curious why you use the C-rank spell, Pack Leader, instead of a more sophisticated, direct method of controlling the animals for detailed observation, Annalise asked. Knowing exact details about an enemy is important. Argrave gestured, and then continued to walk down the street. Gives me less control, sure, But with 2 mages, one of us can act as a net. Pack leader allows one to control many of one's species, but I get only a general sense of what each is feeling. If they feel something, or spot something dangerous, you can use one of the aforementioned more precise druidic spells to get a detailed examination. Argrave trailed off, taking a look at Annalise. Annalise had her arms crossed, and her gaze was locked on something else. Argrave followed her gaze, lifting his head up. There was a body hanging from a rope. It had been cast from the window and tied to something inside. It took a few seconds for Argrave to realize it was a Vadaman. Once he realized that, Argrave became very aware that they were being stared at. "You all right?" Argrave asked. "I'm fine. My people attacked theirs. Perhaps I should have expected this," she returned quickly. "Keep going." Argrave clicked his tongue, but eventually said, "When we make it to Just, I know a shop that sells some enchanted iron circlets. They muddle the features, make them less distinct for the average passers-by. It's an illusion enchantment. For now, maybe we should get going. Or buy a hood." Annalise lifted her head, amber eyes locking with his gaze as he waited for her answer. Eventually, she touched her hair. "The long hair would make a hood difficult. I will manage for now. But thank you." "All right," Argrave said, keeping his gaze steady. "We're done here, Argrave," a guttural, spine-chilling voice called out. Argrave turned to the source of the voice. Glimmin stood there, his black, fur-coated armor covered in a large cloak. There was a bit of his armor missing at the torso from the attack he'd suffered outside Baden. "Holy hell," Argrave exclaimed, walking forward without caution. "I'd never forget that growl." "Was wondering when you'd turn up." Glimmin stayed silent, his white eyes staring at the ground. He refused to meet Argrave's gaze. "We were just wrapping up. Let's go back to that abandoned house. We have some things to discuss." Argrave stepped forward, touching Glimmin's shoulder. "Saved me a lot of trouble. Thought I'd have to go search Baden for you." "What is this?" "Why the cat out?" Glimmin had his face and hands on the floor while kneeling. "What I've done cannot be forgiven. I broke a contract. I harmed the other party." Argrave huffed, and then sat down at the chair in the abandoned house, rubbing his forehead. Annalise walked into the house, brow furrowed after seeing this scene. She shut the door slowly, her eyes jumping from person to person. "All right, get up," Argrave commanded, gesturing with his hand. "Get up, you're embarrassing me," he repeated when Glimmin did nothing. Glimmin took his head off the floor, but he refused to stop kneeling. His white eyes stayed locked on the chair that Argrave sat at, as though he dared not look at Argrave directly. "I broke a contract," Glimmin repeated. "My sin is without measure. I was contracted to protect you, and yet I was the very thing that brought you harm." "I thought we settled this back at the village," Argrave said. "Wasn't a big deal, really. You dealt with the Tomb Guardians. Everything worked out. Just bad timing on my part, something to learn from. Even if you have forgiven me, I violated Vade's teachings. I must be punished," Glimmin said determinedly, his low voice going even lower. "Punished," Argrave repeated. "You took an arrow to the gut for me. A shoulder shot, too." Upon further examination, he noted, seeing a puncture on the elf's pauldron. Argrave leaned in. "I'm not going to punish you. I really don't care. Everything worked out fine. Now, we just get back to business." Glimmin's head shook quickly. "Then I will punish myself." "Vade would demand it." Argrave sighed in exasperation. "What are you planning to do? Go take a sunbathe?" Argrave shook his head. "Annalise, want to chime in?" He turned to her. She nodded. "Ordinarily, a chief would decide the punishment for breaking contract if the contractor did not wish for punishment. Should that fail, they leave it to the oath-breaker." Argrave shook his head. He crossed his legs, falling into thought. Eventually, he nodded. "All right, let's think about this. I won't beat you. Would probably hurt me more than you, considering my physical deficiencies. All things considered, let's quantify the damage done." Argrave held up his fingers, counting. "There's a blood loss. You squeezed my neck real tight, and I had to walk with a cane for a while. Very embarrassing. Let's call that last one mental trauma." "All said," Argrave continued. "You add all that up, carry the one way I figure it, you're looking at about 10 years of indentured servitude as my personal retainer." Glimmin met Argrave's eyes for the first time. The two waited quietly, staring at each other. "What, you think I'm kidding around?" Argrave said finally. "We're going to be doing some dangerous stuff, my friend. Failure usually means death. I've also got a ridiculous number of books to haul about, and I'm definitely not carrying them. Those things are damned heavy." Argrave put his hand to his chin, and then pointed to Glimmin as he remembered something. "I've got years' worth of manual labor for you to do. Making potions, fetching things, etc. You're going to be the muscle I severely lack." The big snow elf lowered his head once more and took off his helmet. His hair fell over his face. "We understand each other?" Argrave pressed. "Your punishment's really quite harsh. This is why you don't ask me to do these things." Glimmin laughed. It was quite a grating noise, and very haunting besides, but it was the first time Argrave had heard it. "You'll work me to the bone, I know." He lifted his head up, and his face took on his typical expression. "But Argrave, I am sorry. I'll be sure that it never happens again. Maybe get big canteens instead of flasks." "What do I know, though?" Argrave waved dismissively. Anyway, now that we've put this nonsense behind us, we can start getting ready. Argrave put his hands to his knees, about to stand, but he paused. Guilliman. Where are your weapons? Argrave asked, scanning the man's waist and back. I did not want to alarm you. I placed them upstairs. With a snap of his fingers, Argrave stood. Go get them. We have some things to fetch from a certain ruin you're familiar with. It's near empty and full of real valuable stuff. You think I'm going to let someone else take that prize from me? We'll need that ebony axe for the big metal man still at the entrance. We can talk about what happened in Veiden, from why Annalise is with us today to how your family is doing. You spoke to them, Guilliman said quietly. I did. Muriel said she loves you. Ramadan said, I don't know, but he probably does too. Argrave took a step forward, grabbing Guilliman's shoulder. I promised her that, one day, you'd be sitting side by side with me as we talked. Family dinner, maybe. Keep your calendar open. Guilliman said nothing. Argrave patted Guilliman's shoulder, then walked away. Guilliman raised his hand to his eyes, hiding a glistening wetness briefly. Then, he stood, putting his helmet back on. He looked to Argrave's back, and his fist clenched as a faint smile marked his face. With a slight nod, he moved to retrieve his weapons. You're leaving tomorrow? Nicoletta asked, looking up at Argrave from his position on horseback. She was escorted by 2 knights and an unusually reticent Mina. That's the plan. Yeah, I have a few things to take care of. I do appreciate you giving us these horses. Argrave turned his head to Annalise and Guilliman, and they both acknowledged his words with a nod. Maybe Nikki shouldn't have, considering you lost the first 2 she gave you, Mina commented. Though, you'd probably have stolen them if she hadn't. You steal 1 horse, people call you the horse thief forever, Argrave said, feigning sadness. Nicoletta laughed a little. She raised a hand to block out the sunlight from her eyes. Well, this lines up nicely. Castro intends to wake my father tomorrow afternoon. If you're not gone by then, our whole plan might go bust. I know, Argrave nodded. But time is wasting. I should be off. He pulled on the horse's reins. Hold on, Nicoletta stopped him. Argrave looked back to her. I might not see you, as I have to stay with Castro during my father's treatment. Where are you going tomorrow? Just by carriage. Got a lot of cargo and some obligations there, after all. Argrave disclosed. I have some things in mind, but I have to discuss said things with my 2 elven companions. The price of doing business, I guess. I see. Nicoletta nodded, and then her expression turned pensive. I'd ask you to be safe, but frankly, what you've told me leads me to believe you can't promise that without lying. You should take better care of yourself, she said sincerely. That's one of the things I have planned, actually, Argrave said with a grin. Well, if I stay longer you might start weeping, so I must depart. Goodbye, Nicoletta, Mina. Thank you for what you've done. House Montesi probably owes you its continued existence. You don't need to thank me for anything. Nicoletta smiled bitterly. Goodbye, Argrave. Bye, Grave. You're a good guy, Mina said slowly. Be well. Argrave nodded. Right. Argrave pointed to the distant mountains. Off to Ethel something, crew. We'll multitask, plan for the future, Grave rob for the present. What are you? Nicoletta started to say, but her voice faded as Argrave set his horse into a gallop. Chapter 46, Come Wind or Rain. Argrave watched the village of Baden from horseback. The metal men had been stacked in a great pit off the side to the village. All along the coast, devastation was apparent. Few villages were left untouched, and even now, refugees moved to Mateth. The great fields outside of the city had been trampled, crushed, burnt, and more. This place might be racked by famine in the years to come. In the corner of his mind, he could feel the consciousness of the pigeons under the control of his druidic magic. Rather than seeing through their eyes, it was like he was vaguely cognizant of what they could feel. He could tell that they saw people, and the direction those people might be in, but little beyond that. It would be helpful for avoiding ambushes. Annalise was still very unused to riding horses, and Argrave kept the pace slow for this reason. Ride closer, Argrave directed to Guilliman and Annalise. They did so, Annalise awkwardly directing her horse forward. Though Argrave had suggested she use druidic magic to handle the horse, she refused. She wanted to learn. Now that this little party of mine is assembled, we can talk about what happens next. Argrave looked to Guilliman and Annalise. They watched him quietly. Long term, our priority is to mitigate Girektig Kiet's influence. Though it hasn't spread far yet, the plague brewing in the northeast can devastate the continent. Indeed, it takes priority over stopping the civil war in Vaska. As such, that's our first long-term goal. But you grow sick easily, Annalise interrupted. I was getting to that, Argrave agreed. He took the horse off-road, heading to the distant mountains where the old tomb would still be. With the invasion from the Vadaimon halted, I have a lot more leeway in terms of what can be done. With my physique, going to deal with the plague now would likely just end with my death. As such, it needs to be dealt with. Argrave looked to Guilliman. I won't turn you into a vampire, the elf said quickly and harshly. Perish the thought. Did I say anything about growing my teeth out? Everyone is interrupting, Argrave complained. Just listen. As we are now, we need to get our builds ready. In other words, We need to focus on personal growth. Argrave gestured to Gilliman. You are already a very powerful warrior, but compared to others, you lack good equipment. Your axe is one thing, but at the very least, you need an enchanted bow and a good enchanted greatsword. Finding armor that fits your body is going to be difficult. Armor isn't exactly one size fits all. It'll need to be custom made. As for you, Argrave pointed to Annalise. You need to learn the spells I specify. Some of them I have. Others I will need to get. Mateth is a bit lacking in the scholarly department, but Just will have most everything we need. The majority of the spells you should learn are lightning-oriented elemental magic. Why? She asked simply. You have a high affinity with magic just as I do. This helps with lightning magic's one disadvantage, its tremendous cost. It's fast, precise, and can affect many at once. Few things are attuned to lightning, and as such, few enemies can resist it. There's a set of items that I'm going to get that will magnify electricity's power, too, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Argrave and company passed over the dead body of one of the tomb guardians that had been using a bow. Glimmin watched it as they passed, growing ever closer to the mountains. As for me, I'll learn much of the same stuff Annalise does. Beyond that, there's the issue of my body. Eating my peas and carrots and getting some exercise is the least of it. I have to address my fragile constitution. As I am now, I'm plague food. Argrave clenched the reins together. I've thought of a few ways. One of them Gilliman mentioned, vampirism. But forget that. It's a last resort. Gilliman touched Argrave's elbow, pointing to the direction of the entrance of the mine shaft. The three of them rode towards it. Dismounting, Argrave tied their horse to a rock quietly. The birds, under the influence of his spell, pack leader, flew down, landing on the horse's saddle. Argrave had grown used to their presence, and already felt quite protective of them. With all of these conditions in mind, the best place to go would be south, past the territory of House Parban. They're not fond of me there, but they're also busy with a war, and we have the advantage in scouting with druidic magic. We're to head to a place called the Burnt Desert. Gilliman shifted uneasily, but Annalise only stared with a neutral expression. Argrave carried on, standing by the horses. I know an alchemist there. We'll have to collect some things on the way, but he's one of the few people who can get rid of my sickliness permanently. He'll make me black-blooded. Fitting, I guess. Doesn't change the fact that it's a pain in the ass. What is the Burnt Desert? Annalise inquired. A desert of black sand. Really incredibly hot, I'm told, but it's near winter. Best time to head there. It'll probably be very cold at night. It's also a lawless wasteland of degenerate tribes, Gilliman added, voice low. Lizardmen, cannibalistic humans, the Southron elves. Maybe it was. Argrave held a hand out as if telling him to relax. Right now, they're in no mood for degeneracy. Ordinarily, these tribes are known to rear and trade wyverns. They're in the middle of a drought, though. We're not there to deal with that. We get what we need, and then we leave. Simple as. Gilliman nodded contentedly. Annalise asked, what do you mean by he'll make me black-blooded? Just that. He'll change my blood from red to black. It's his life project. The things that we'll need to fetch are a detour, but without it, I'll die from the plague. That does not explain what it does, Annalise pressed. Been months since I read about it. Argrave paused, thinking. It makes the blood denser, and rather than just carrying oxygen to the muscles, it imbues magic into it. Effectively, over the course of a few weeks, the body will be entirely changed similarly to creatures naturally born with magic. Like dragons, Argrave pointed, smiling. Oxygen? Annalise asked. Air, Argrave elaborated, feeling like he was answering the questions of a child with insatiable curiosity. We breathe to transfer air to the muscles. This thing has some consequences. The transitional period is said to be painful. I have to eat much more than the average person. My magic pool will be smaller but will recover much quicker. There's other stuff, but it's situational. That said, I'll probably be the healthiest person here when all is said and done. Annalise nodded, absorbing the information. This sounds very dangerous. You trust this person to perform this procedure? Naturally, Argrave said. He moved away from the horses. But let's move into the mines. We have some things to fetch. Gilliman, as my indentured servant, you will be carrying all of them. Argrave and Annalise walked off. Gilliman stayed standing by the horses for a time, then eventually slung a bag over his shoulder and followed with a quiet sigh. Gilliman, said Annalise, grabbing the man's shoulder. The elven vampire stopped, looking back at Annalise. Argrave walked away ahead, a flame whirling about his head to illuminate the stone paths of the ancient ruin. The tomb's king was some distance behind them. It had died just as easy as the rest once its metal skin was pierced by ebon ice. I have some questions for you. She spoke quietly. I have some of my own, Gilliman returned. Why you wished to come with Argrave? Why he agreed to it? Argrave's footsteps faded away, and the two Vadaimon stared at each other in the dark, a flame swirling above Annalise's head just the same as Argrave. I can answer those, but I ask that you allow me my questions first. Annalise said, and seeing Gilliman did not protest, continued. Let me ask you this. Why are you so certain that Argrave is an agent of Erlabin? Did he tell you personally? Gilliman turned around fully. I saw him head to a shrine in the forest that no one else seemed to know of. He spoke directly with an emissary of Erlebnia and received a blessing. This blessing was pivotal in dispatching those 10 druids. In addition, he possesses an uncanny knowledge about too much. I'm sure you're familiar with this. He never told you directly. It was an assumption. Annalise pressed. Glimmen paused. It has basis. It is a presumption. Annalise nodded. I can agree with that. Let me ask you this, though. Have you ever felt that his knowledge extends beyond what even Erlebnia should know? Glimmen only stared blankly, the fire reflecting off his white eyes. He knew that city, Mateth, almost too well. Why would Erlebnia teach him that? How does Erlebnia even receive knowledge? There are too many unknowns, and he refuses to answer questions on the matter. Annalise continued. From the beginning, he probably knew your character. While it is well enough to say that Erlebnia may know these things, he did not interact with you as though you were strangers. He acted familiarly, rather than knowing about you. He acted as though he knew you. At least, such was the case with me, and others I saw him speak to. Am I wrong in this? Glimmen said nothing, and Annalise continued. You ask me why Argrave allowed me to come with him. This perplexed me just as much. From the beginning, he had decided I was a person of good character. This alchemist he mentioned, he trusts him well enough to perform this procedure to make him black-blooded. Despite having never met him, that extends far beyond mere knowledge. His face tightening, Glimmen spoke firmly. Argrave is a very kind person. It is simply his character to trust and act with familiarity. I consider it my duty to ensure he is not harmed from being gullible. That may be the case. I know how to understand people well, though, and I don't think Argrave is any more or less trusting than the average person. Ask yourself this. Has he ever misplaced his trust? Has he ever been betrayed? Has he ever made a poor evaluation of another's character? Make your point, Glimmen said gruffly. I don't know my point, Annalise said with a sigh. She could not help but remember some words they'd exchanged about her strong empathy. It might make me surprised, throw a wrench into the conversation that forces some semblance of honesty from me. Might make me mind my words a little bit. But uncomfortable? Not at all. Argrave had no trouble lying, that Annalise knew. He was one of the better actors she'd seen. From the outside looking in, everything he did was for a greater good. Even despite his deceptive tendencies he seemed a genuine person, and she enjoyed speaking to him. But the fact remained that he refused to directly acknowledge his association to Erlebnia. I just think we aren't getting the full picture, Annalise said finally. The full truth. Glimmen shook his head. What Argrave discloses is his business. Meeting someone like him is a blessing. He's arrogant, talkative, condescending, and somewhat infuriating, but he's one of the best people I've met, elven or otherwise. Do not let your doubts interfere with what he does. I certainly won't. My doubts or your doubts. Keep that in mind. Annalise studied Glimmen, discerning his emotions. She was worried she had angered him, but she only saw protectiveness, not hate. I'll help as best I can, Annalise promised. My reasons for being here aren't entirely selfless, but you can be assured of that. This is to be a long journey that I may not even survive. I've resolved myself for that. Glimmen slowly nodded. Let's join Argrave. As you said, this is to be a very long journey. Steel your resolve further. Come wind or rain, as long as that man marches forward, we must march alongside him. Chapter 47. Beneath the lion's sun. The two suns were just beginning to set behind the mountains, the red moon rising to take its place. At a point in the vast ridge, two mountains converged to form a narrow valley. Uneven rolling hills occupied one side of the mountains, covered with infrequent patches of dormant grass. If one went through the valley, moving beyond the mountains, one could see an unending expanse of black sand marred by a single half-buried stone road leading straight out from the valley. In the middle of the valley, a man-made wall of smooth taupe stone stood tall, the two towers on each side partially merging with the mountains. A great many knights walked atop the walls, wearing white plate mail with a golden lion on the breastplate. In the center of the wall, a statue of a lion looked out across the black desert. Its jaws were open as though roaring. A glistening orange sphere shone from within its mouth, clenched by its fangs. Sparks of magic occasionally surged along the wall, each originating from the sphere in the lion's mouth. The two mountains that formed the valley had been carved away near the summit to form two keeps. The rough, uneven terrain had been chipped down in way of square rooms with simple windows. These rooms, too, shone with enchantments, and the windows offered a view of both the desert and the hills before the mountains. Opposite this keep and across the valley, the entire peak had been sheared away, revealing a vast field of open stone contained within a small wall. The man-made plateau on the peak was marked by claw marks and scratches. Elsewhere it was filled with bones, many of them so old the sun had bleached them white. Others were more freshly eaten. None of them were human bones. Cow, pig, or sheep comprised the majority. The creator of these bone piles rested in the center of the mountain top with its tail coiled around its body. The wyvern was a great beast, a dark red that made it look like the dragons of old. It was noticeably muscular on both its wings and its legs. It feasted on a sheared sheep, one of many resting beside its maw. Someone sat beside it on a stone chair carved from the landscape. Margrave Reinhardt ran his hands across his wyvern's head as it dug into its food. Even now, he wore his white plate mail armor. His long red hair fell past his shoulders and ended where the cloak of the same color began. His gaze was distant as he watched the beast eat, clearly lost in thought. The wyvern lifted its head from its food, shifting its body to attention. The Margrave was drawn from his haze, and he followed his mount's gaze. In the distance, a man with dark green hair moved up the stairs in the corner of the room and started to move to the Margrave with long, hurried strides. The Margrave soothed the wyvern, and it resumed eating. "Margrave Reinhardt." The man greeted from a distance. He was a young man with a handsome, earnest face. He slowed his steps, the wyvern clearly making him cautious. "I have more news." "Speak, then, Baron Julio." The Margrave directed. Julio reached into his shirt and pulled free a stack of letters. "More responses have arrived. Not a single southern noble has decided to support Vasca. The majority of them have remained neutral, but the Duke of Byrrel declared he would be gathering his forces in support. I'm sure that, once word of that spreads, the southwestern nobles will fall in line," Julio said excitedly. The Margrave nodded. "It's as you say. The majority will wait for the result of the first major battle to make a decision. Being neutral alone is a great boon." Reinhardt gazed at his aide and the Duke of Montesai. "Regarding that." Baron Julio rubbed his hands together. "The young Lord Elias has returned. He says that he brought news from Mateth." The Margrave narrowed his eyes, turning back to the wyvern briefly. "I see. He went to visit his sister in the temple." Julio proceeded slowly. "He wishes to see you when he can. Send him up when you return," Reinhardt directed, voice low. "What else?" Julio gathered himself. "The knights are already all assembled. Many of the mages of the Order of the Grey Owl residing in Parban have decided to support, but the Order itself remains neutral, partly because Master Castro is away and has yet to respond. The Duke of Elbrail has not responded. By extension, his vassal Count Delbran of Just also remains neutral." "I flew with Master Castro once," Reinhardt said, reminiscing. "For as old as he is, a terrific flyer. He uses magic to bond with a beast, though. An enchanted whistle. Never was fond of that. Impersonal." The Margrave shook his head. "The Order won't take a side. The individual mages are what's important. You can use all the funds of House Parban at your disposal to recruit them. They may decide who wins the war." "Certainly," Julio nodded enthusiastically. "As you instructed, we have sent out advance notice of the levy. Public opinion is high. Vasca is not well liked, and after what occurred at Dirica, people are doubly ready to take arms in defense of the Margravate." The Margrave seemed disquieted by this. "Relying on levy. I don't like it. But Vasca undoubtedly will, and we will likely lose if we do not." He scratched his chin where red stubble poked out. "With winter soon to come, any significant military activity will be impossible. We can only gather our forces and focus on preparing supplies to endure. True war will begin with spring." "The harvests this year were good, but..." "Margrave, if I may suggest something," Julio began, and seeing the Margrave not respond, he continued. "Considering our enemy is Vasca, we should prepare for sabotage, watch the comings and goings of refugees carefully, protect the granaries, be mindful of the rivers. That should be our night's focus as we build our strength for spring." The Margrave looked at his hands and nodded. "You are right. I have been warring with the southern tribes for years, meeting them at the Lion's Sun Wall. They lack fear, but they do not stoop to treachery. This will be a different kind of war." Emboldened, Julio continued. "If we conscript the militiamen, too, our forces will be further bolstered." "I can." "You're overreaching," Reinhardt cut Julio off, turning back to his wyvern. "Take the militiamen, leave the villages defenseless. Bandits mostly form from deserted soldiers. War is the time when they are most present. I should leave the people without a method to defend themselves." Reinhardt fixed his ruby eyes on Julio. "You've been good as my aide, Julio, but do not forget that this war began to overthrow a tyrant. Go now. Send Elias to me." He waved his hand. Baron Julio bowed, but his fists clenched tightly at his side. "Yes, Margrave." At once. The Baron walked away, and the wyvern tossed aside the corpse of the sheep, retrieving another. "Redden," the Margrave said lightly. After hearing its name, the wyvern's eyes came to attention and it moved its head in front of the Margrave. He scratched beneath its chin, and some huffs of air came out from its nose. "I might be leading my whole family to its death. Hundreds of thousands of people could die because of this war." The wyvern stared passively, ignorant of the words. "Bruna might already be dead because of what I did." The Margrave lowered his hand from the wyvern. "Am I ignoble?" But Redden did not answer. Seeing no more scratches would come, it returned to its food. A few moments of quiet passed, and then the wyvern lifted its head once more. It let out quite a growl, and then shot past Reinhardt. The Margrave lifted his head to see the beast striding towards his son. Elias met it with open arms, briefly holding back Redden's head like meeting a bull's charge. Reinhardt stood, following close behind as the play between Redden and Elias continued. Eventually Elias fell to his back, exhausted, and Reinhardt came to stand over him. He offered a hand to his son, and Elias took it, rising to his feet. Reinhardt watched as his son caught his breath. The wyvern moved back to its food, claws echoing across the plateau as they scratched the stone. The dusk light was fading. Reinhardt spoke first. "I had been considering how I might punish you this whole time. I thought back to my own childhood, my father." Elias waited quietly. "I was just as stubborn as you were when I was young. I thought I was always right. I still do, in some things. Reinhardt reached a hand up and put it on Elias' shoulder. As time passed, I realized I was glad you had not come to Dirika. You could not have guaranteed your own safety as I could. And further, I was not relying on you to do anything. Elias blinked, some of the tension in his shoulders relaxing. Father, I'm sorry. I know. You're a good boy, Reinhardt said sincerely. Nonetheless, you are my son and heir. I am prone to whimsy, as most of our ancestors have. We have power and trust our instincts, our gut. The Margrave pounded his fist against his chest where his heart was. But as my heir, I must teach you responsibility. You have a responsibility to ensure the protection of the people beneath you. Flights of fancy can lead to their death. I understand that, father. Elias nodded. I wanted to find our grave. That was what my gut told me to do. Having done that, I'm glad I did. Reinhardt took his hand off his son's shoulder. Just let me speak, Reinhardt directed. What you need isn't punishment. You need responsibility. You need to realize that, as the heir to House Parban, you wield enormous influence with corresponding consequence. Mateth is, Elias tried to speak. I've been deliberating how, exactly, I might show that to you, Reinhardt continued. As a spellcaster, you walk a very different path from your forefathers. We have all been knights. With a war coming, and spellcasters being a very important variable on the field of battle, I've decided to send you to just as an envoy to recruit mages to House Parban. Theirs is the city of magic, and, Mateth can't join the civil war because they're going to be invaded, Elias finally said, cutting past his father's lecture. The Snow Elves, Vadaimon, they call themselves, have been planning to invade Mateth for some months. They may already be attacking it by this point. The Margrave stood with his mouth open for a time, expression confused. That was our Grave's aim the whole time. I don't know if he was doing the bidding of the royal family, or merely acting independently, but I've come to think he's not an inherently malicious person. Regardless, he's helping Duke Enrico prepare defenses. The Snow Elves? The Margrave asked incredulously. The bulky, pale-skinned elves? Yes, Elias confirmed. The Margrave looked back. And then Gr. Chapter 48, Ambition and Anger. Annalise held a coin in her hand, twisting it through the light passing through the carriage. Though the coin was a metallic pink, its surface shone with a great many colors twisting with the light. It wasn't so simple as light reflecting off its surface, though. Its projection of light was indeterminable and unending, twisting to create beautiful images indefinitely. It was, after all, a magic coin. How does this thing function? Annalise asked. Argrave lifted his head from a book to Annalise. Guilliman, who sat outside to drive the carriage, looked back. Seeing he wasn't the one addressed, he turned his eyes back to the road. Argrave took a few seconds to discern what Annalise was speaking of, and then said, no one knows. They're not made anymore because the method was lost. That's why they're valuable. Who made it? Annalise continued. The Order of the Rose, an extinct mage order from the north, Argrave answered easily. At one time, they were the only gold coins in Vaska. As the kingdom grew, the Order of the Rose died off, and their value started to skyrocket over the centuries. Annalise nodded, placing the coin back into the lockbox alongside mounds of ancient, enchanted jewelry and precious jewels they had taken from the ruins of the Tomb Guardians. Argrave intended to bring them to just to appraise their worth. Both people in the carriage picked up their books once again, reading quietly. Guilliman, their driver, wore a brown robe to conceal most of his features. The carriage they rode was humble but formidable, with a large compartment for luggage in the back. Two strong horses pulled them along. Their journey was a very quiet one. At times, either Annalise or Argrave would raise their head, each trying to form the magic spell they were learning. Argrave looked at the terrain and occasionally directed Guilliman to turn down a different road. Annalise would ask questions as she thought of them. Argrave, too, occasionally sought her out for help with particular druidic spells. Eventually, Annalise finally closed the book, staring at Argrave. Are you ever going to tell us where we're going? Argrave looked up. I told you. Side quests. There are two places we must visit before we head to Jast. One is a short stop for a spellbook, that's the last. The other is the Cavern of the Death of Lilies. Argrave paused. Or was it the Cavern of the Lilies' Death? It's been a while. Argrave placed his handkerchief to mark his spot, and then shut the book. Anyway, the cavern's our first stop. One of 4 ingredients for becoming black-blooded is in that cavern, and likely the hardest to get. It'll be immeasurably useful for me, less so for you. It's a crystal, but it's more than that at the same time. It's called the Amaranthine Heart. Argrave spread his fingers out to emulate roots digging into the ground. It takes root in whatever it touches, then slowly spreads out, constantly absorbing magic from anything near it and turning it into a black liquid. This liquid is pure magic, dangerous when taken in large doses, but it can be drunk when needed to recover magic. Closest thing to a magic potion we'll find. Best to get now, as I'm sure we'll have need of it in our journeys in the future. Argrave's gaze grew distant and his tone became monotonous. There will be fighting. The cavern is filled with large bugs. It will be extremely unpleasant and nasty. I am not looking forward to adding yet more things to my nightmares. Above all, Argrave continued with renewed vigor. We can't take the main roads. We have to be very cautious traveling through the southward with the war going on. That's why druidic magic was a blessing to me, though I will admit it is a bit unsettling feeling these birds flying outside the carriage. I am confused, Annalise confessed. With a war going on, will they attack random passers-by? It seems we are being unduly cautious. You really don't. Argrave paused. Come to think of it, I never told you. I am one of 5 sons to King Felipe III of Vasca, and the only base-born of those 5. In the territory of a rebellion against the king, my presence will not be especially wanted, unless it's as a captive. Annalise's eyes widened. Did I really never tell you? Argrave asked. Well, I am the sole royal bastard of this kingdom. Used to be literal and figurative. Now it's just literal. Debatably. Argrave nodded, and then resumed reading his book. Annalise looked out the carriage window to Guilliman, expression asking silently if this was normally how he was. Guilliman nodded, and then turned his head back to the road. Duke Enrico spasmed in his bed as a light coursed around him. He gasped loudly and his eyes opened wide. His hands rushed towards his chest, clutching the simple nightclothes that covered his body. He slowly calmed, eyes darting around the room. Tower Master Castro stood above him, while his daughter, Nicoletta, watched with her hands covering her mouth. Dad? Nicoletta said slowly. What's happened? He said quickly. There. Enrico tried to get up off the bed, but the Tower Master held a hand to his shoulder. Duke Enrico. The battle is over. He gently pushed the Duke back to the bed. You are in your bed at the estate. Nicoletta lunged forward, tackling her father back into the bed. Castro was surprised, but he stepped back amusedly after a second. Duke Enrico blinked, his hand hovering around his daughter's back as he slowly discerned what was happening. When he realized the danger had passed, he slowly returned the embrace and settled back into his bed. We won? The Duke said, voice hoarse. Nicoletta pushed away, coming to sit on the bed beside her father. That's right, Dad. She smiled brightly. How do you feel? I feel. The Duke tested his body. Weak, and dreadfully hungry. How long has it been? It's been 4 days, Nicoletta told him slowly. I've been serving as regent to repair the city and restore order. We should be. Enrico closed his eyes, thinking. Preparing for the next assault. No, Nicoletta said happily. It's over, Dad. The Vadaimon won't be returning. Argrave came through. She reached forward and grabbed his arms, shaking him lightly. The Duke said nothing for a time, processing the information slowly in the wake of his recent awakening. Master Castro stepped forward. There should be no issue with his memory, and his physical condition will improve as long as he eats and moves about. He should eat slowly, so as not to overtax his stomach, he directed Nicoletta. Treat him as a prisoner who has been imprisoned for some time without food or water. With that, I will let you two have privacy. Master Castro? The Duke asked. Why are you here? As Castro walked away, Nicoletta explained, he turned the tide of the battle. He also roused you from your coma. Castro nodded, and then exited the room quietly, closing the door behind him. The Duke looked around the room, taking in his surroundings. Nicoletta stood from the bed, retrieving some water. Here, she said, handing it to him. So Argrave stopped the invasion? The Duke asked incredulously. When Nicoletta nodded, he took a small sip of the water. I need to reward him. He's already gone. He said he had more to do, Nicoletta answered. He and I spoke regarding the betrayal you wanted. He seemed amenable to the idea, and thinking about it more, so am I, Nicoletta began, fumbling over her words. Due to the lie. You are? Enrico asked, setting the cup down on the nightstand. Yes, she nodded, staring at the sheets. That's good news, the Duke said. He let out a laugh. That's wonderful, Nicoletta. Nicoletta lifted her head up to see her further beaming brightly, wiping some tears from his eyes. You have no idea how happy that makes me. Even from a young age, you never took to any of the boys. A father's dream, most told me, but I was worried. I thought it might be because your mother and later, Elwind, both died. Nicoletta looked to the floor, rubbing her hands together guiltily. Argrave. His actions have changed much in so little time, the Duke said. He reached for his cup and took another drink of water. He's the only good thing to come of House Vasca in the past decades, the Duke said, anger making his voice hoarser. I never talked about how your mother died. At those words Nicoletta looked up at her father, confused by the sudden change of subject. You said she died in childbirth. In childbirth? Yes, but between healing magic and research into the subject, such a thing is impossible for the Duchess of House Montesai, Enrico said angrily. I got her the best care. There was foul play involved. Whether poison or magic, someone had her killed. Nicoletta listened intensely, seeing as her father was telling her something she had never heard before. As you recall, Indune's mother died the same way. Felipe's first wife died in childbirth. Enrico pointed with his cup. King Felipe used to be a good man, and he loved both the people and his wife. When the first queen died during Indune's birth, he knew just as I do that there was foul play. The people he trusted most, people like me, became his potential enemies overnight. Felipe brought the whole realm under investigation, searching for a poisoner. Duke Enrico grit his teeth, his gaze distant as he recalled distant and uncomfortable memories. Though I helped him as best I could, we came up with no answers. With only 2 children, his daughter Eleanor and in June, most of his council insisted he move on and remarry. The Duke drank more water. Reluctantly, the king turned his focus back to the realm and his children, and the realm was good. Enrico took a deep breath and exhaled. Eventually, King Felipe met Valeria, the present queen and Orion's mother. She was perfect in every way, it seemed. Beautiful, ingenious, powerful. They fell in love. At the time, it seemed the couple of the century, the magnanimous widower King Felipe and high society's star, Valeria of Norden. But Queen Valeria? They say she's mad, Nicoletta asked in confusion. Duke Enrico nodded. She started to lose her mind after Orion was born. Visions, hallucinations, rapid mood swings, temperamental behavior. King Felipe's paranoia resurfaced and his cruelty redoubled. He thought someone had done something again. He did everything, completely uncaring of right or wrong, to find out what had happened to Valeria. The Duke swallowed the last of his water. Eventually, in anger, I told him that he could not use his sadness as an excuse to trample on the people. He removed me from the council, and I returned to rule at Mateth. He looked to Nicoletta. Later that same year, your mother Gabrielle died. She died the exact same way the first queen did. Skin pulled tight against her bones, veins bursting out of. The Duke took a second, composure lost. He brought some of the sheets up to wipe away the tears from his face. Nicoletta watched. She did feel some emotion, but she had never known her mother as her father did. I went to the capital for an audience with the king. I told him what had happened. And he... The Duke clenched the sheets tight. He just looked at me, a devil's grin marking his face, those cold, grey eyes wide in delight like some abyssal portal into the underworld. I knew, then, my answer, even without proof. He poisoned his own sister, your mother, to teach me a lesson, to make me endure same pain he did. Nicoletta opened her mouth but felt a choking sadness at her throat. Duke Enrico stared at his hands. He said something after that, offered my position on the council back as though I would suddenly support him now that I knew his pain. Enrico shook his head. That man isn't fit to sit on the throne. Once, King Felipe III cared. That version of him died with his first wife, Enrico said with a grim tone. If Reinhardt had not acted foolishly, there still would have been war. The people hate what Vasco has become. Why are you talking about this now, father? What are you driving at? Duke Enrico took a deep breath and exhaled. I don't know enough about Argrave, but from what little I've seen, he's one with tremendous bravery and a good nature. He's somewhat unfathomable. I have no idea how he halted this invasion, nor even that he intended to do so. Your point being? Reinhardt is an impulsive man and my friend. I don't think he has a plan for what comes after this civil war of his, Enrico disclosed. I will support him with what little remains after the disaster with the Vadaman. When the war is over, I will be sure that you sit on the throne, Nicoletta. Nicoletta was greatly taken aback. But father, I won't force it on you. You are my pride and joy, and I have full confidence in leaving either the dukedom or the kingdom of Vasca to you. Enrico's dark pink eyes stared at her intensely, then looked away. Should you decline, Argrave's claim is the best. All of Felipe's true-born sons are as debased as him, and I'll not suffer them on the throne. The marriage with Argrave would solidify both of your claims and should help ensure stability. This is overwhelming, father, Nicoletta said quietly. I know. My tongue is looser than normal, the Duke said. The biggest flaw in this idea is Argrave himself. I know little of his motivations, his character, or even his true allegiance. I must force him to make those things clear. Enrico nodded. To begin with, I should spread the news of his halting the Vadaman invasion. News of the sale of Foamspire, too, should reach Dirica. It will incense Prince Indune if the two are not collaborators. Wait, Nicoletta stopped him. Argrave insisted that we should remain neutral in the war. Why? Enrico asked. Nicoletta took a deep breath. I have some trouble wrapping my head around it, but this is what he said. Chapter 49, White Edge. Annalise looked out the window of the carriage, her head resting on her hand. Her other hand played with her hair, which was splayed out on her thighs. The carriage rode across a field of lilies, leaving two trails behind in the pure white flowers. The field seemed unending. As Argrave recalled, one could only see this field at certain times in the game. Fall. They bloomed near the end of fall. A pretty sight, Annalise commented. Like snow, but alive. Yes, very beautiful, Argrave agreed, staring at Annalise. As we move ahead, they'll begin to turn red, and beyond that, wilt. That means we're growing closer to the cavern. Her amber eyes switched from the scenery to him. Erlebnit told you this? He doesn't tell you so much as reach into your head and place things there, Argrave responded. Unpleasant yet convenient at the same time. She crossed her legs, placing her hands atop her knee. For an agent of Erlebnit, you don't seem to river. Now that we're getting this close, we should really discuss the plan for these insects. Argrave shut the book he held in his hand, changing the subject. These bugs, they're called lily lurkers locally. They're the reason this field is so largely undisturbed. Argrave set his book on the carriage seat, and Gilliman slowed the horses to hear his words better. The nearby village's young couples would have late-night rendezvous at this place when the lilies bloomed because the moonlight reflects beautifully off the white flowers. Now, at night, those bugs roam the field like supersized ants, ripping people apart. Argrave pointed. You know, ants can carry. Argrave paused, struggling to remember the number. 0.100 times their own body weight. If I remember right. They're strong. These bugs, they're the same way, except they weigh about 10 pounds and have a paralytic poison stinger. They're around the size of my head. Annalise nodded, a frown disturbing her face. You mentioned they come out at night. We must have come here during the day to attack them while they're in their burrow. Burn them out, perhaps. She waved her hand as she offered the example. A plausible solution, Argrave agreed. But the underground caverns are large enough it would be difficult to do either. Burning them out or using water might collapse the cavern, too. We need to go inside. This task requires precision. Entering the cavern would be suicide, Gilliman contributed. Tight spaces. Perfect for those bugs. Impossible to kill when they're in large numbers. Both of you. Argrave spread his arms out, shaking his head as though ashamed. He clapped his hands together, though the sound was muffled by his gloves. Such mindless killers. Violence isn't always the answer. Both of them looked at him like he was mental. Argrave carried on, unaffected. Fact is, we can't butcher this whole colony of lily lurkers. Waste of time to even try. Would take weeks, maybe a month. If we tried to kill them off one by one without any casualties, their numbers are too high. Originally, I had been thinking just the same as you two, and consequently dreading this task. But these bugs, they have to eat. No, poison. Annalise caught on quickly, and Argrave confirmed with a nod. Plausible, Gilliman commented. Don't think poisoning counts as non-violent, though. Argrave waved his hand. Mere semantics. If it had been the game, no such option would be available to Argrave. One follows the quest marker, goes into the cave, kills the bugs. End of quest. That option would probably be much more fun. Were this a game, naturally, Argrave would much sooner jump off a tower and be done with it than walk into a cavern infested with lily lurkers. Even ants have instincts, Annalise responded after some consideration. These bugs, if they are like ants, won't eat poison even if it is laced into something they will eat. We use a slow-acting poison they don't recognize. It's all just trial and error. Argrave spotted some discontent with that statement, and he quickly added, all of the other ideas are terrible. This one is at least worth exploring. True, Annalise agreed. But we brought no poison. Listen. Argrave leaned forward. I might forget some elven ruin's name, or the precise name of a cavern, or the exact number of pounds an ant can carry. I can promise you, though, I definitely won't forget a single recipe for poison. I wrote thousands of articles about alchemy, be it the ingredients or the final product. It was unimaginably tedious. Argrave tapped his temple. This mind of mine is all we need to make every poison creatable in Berenda. We're deep in the countryside. Shouldn't be much trouble to get what's needed. Why did you write thousands of articles? Annalise asked after a long pause. That's a good question, Argrave acknowledged with a nod. I'm not sure myself. Masochism, perhaps. We'll get back to that. For now. Argrave turned his gaze towards Gilliman. Gilliman, turn left. Hard to brew potions in the middle of a field. We should head for that village. Argrave peered out the carriage window. In the distance, he could see a field of red that made it seem as though the lilies had turned to roses. The sight set a flame of anxiety alight in his chest. This would be the first time he tried something major that was beyond the constraints imposed by heroes of Berenda. It could be said Mateth had already been an example of this. But Argrave did not feel that was his victory alone. A village. Argrave muttered. It might be time to bring up the blackguard name once again. The village of White Edge was typically a very quiet place. Not many lived here, particularly because they were so far from any source of water or civilization. They paid homage only to the Count of Jast, who himself was sworn to the Duchy of Elbril. They did not have much to offer to the Count in way of taxes, and consequently, protection was insignificant as well. Still, some minor families persisted here, growing what few crops could be grown without a nearby water source. The houses in White Edge were of better make than most of the villages one might find in the countryside. In way of simple plank walls and straw roofs, these buildings were well constructed and near uniform in design. They looked fanciful rather than sturdy. When coupled with the well-kept hedges and yards, the place had an altogether idyllic air. An old man sat on one of the porches of the houses, chewing at his thumb's nail as he tapped his feet quickly and anxiously against the porch. He was missing a few of the teeth on the right side of his mouth, and significant balding left him with only a ring of grey around the top of his head. He occasionally cast glances at some of the people working at harvesting the last of the crops grown in autumn. But besides that, his gaze remained fixed on the sole dirt road leading to the village from the forests. The old man's tapping feet came to a stop, and he leaned forward until he was sitting on the edge of his chair. After a few seconds of watching, his eyes narrowed, he stood and walked off the stairs leading to the porch. He strode across the village square with purpose. A few people in the village watched him rush by curiously. In the far distance, a wooden carriage moved closer. The old man and some few others gathered to watch the carriage come in. In a small town, someone arriving by carriage was undoubtedly a notable event. Perhaps they'd be less welcoming if they knew that Argrave had circled around the village before rejoining the road. He assumed it would not be especially appreciated if the villagers knew he had left trails of carriage wheels and horseshoe marks along their favorite romantic gathering spot. Argrave looked to Annalise, who had her hands in her lap as she waited quietly. "No issues with the plan? Doesn't involve us much anyway." Annalise shook her head. "Your methods are strange, but you have come this far, so I will simply follow along." "That doesn't exactly ooze faith," Argrave commented. "Well, faith is earned, I suppose." "You'll be singing my praises by the end of this," Argrave half muttered as he looked out the window. "I'm sure I will." Annalise nodded. Argrave glanced at her to be sure her amber eyes weren't rolling. "I'll be charitable and assume you're not being sarcastic." Annalise smiled lightly and said nothing further as the carriage started to slow. When it came to a stop, Argrave pulled back the door's bolt and pushed open the door, alighting onto the road. Above, Glumman leapt from the top of the carriage, and it shifted when deprived of his weight. Argrave stretched and moved his joints about, freeing himself of the stiffness from the ride. Annalise gathered the books in the carriage and walked around to the back, placing them with the rest of the luggage. "Excuse me," an old man said, walking before Argrave. Though the old man looked like he had something more to say, Argrave spoke quicker. "Are you Bertrand Gill, the one who sent the notice to Just?" His voice was serious and low. The old man paused, looking up at Argrave and his company. "Yes, I am," the man said, his voice slightly strange on account of his missing teeth. "You're from Just? You got my notice, then? You're the help?" "Yes, I'm Wizard Argrave of Blackguard." Argrave retrieved his wizard's badge from the Order of the Grey Owl, making it shine by willing some of his magic into it. "This is my pupil, and the other is my guard, Guilliman. I've come by order of Count Delbrun to deal with those creatures you mentioned." Bertrand held out a finger badly bent from arthritis. "I told everyone that this was a serious matter that Just couldn't ignore, and everyone didn't believe me." He shouted back to the crowd some distance behind him. The people started to approach and gather in front of them. It was not an especially large crowd, 7 or 8. They all had to look up at the three of them. "Why are you with elves?" one asked, some suspicion in his tone. Argrave ignored the question. "It's a good thing you did send notice. It's a better thing that I'm the one who got it." "These creatures, lily lurkers, you call them?" Argrave waited for Bertrand to nod, and then proceeded. "They're Dextromorphous exocelcines. Very troublesome creatures." Argrave surveyed the crowd. No one seemed to have the slightest idea the grandiose name was entirely fabricated. "Ordinarily, I'd have more colleagues with me. As it stands, most everyone in Just is preparing for the civil war." "War?" someone echoed. "What are you talking about?" "Margrave Reinhardt of House Parban has declared war against the royal family in an attempt to end their tyranny," Argrave explained succinctly. "But that is a long way off, and Just has maintained neutrality in mirror of their liege lord, the Duke of Elbril. More importantly, it's not why I'm here." The small crowd was unsettled. Beyond them, more people started to approach, and the crowd grew larger yet. "These bugs in your lily fields need to be dealt with," Argrave said briskly. "As such, Count Delbrun has given me leave to enlist your aid." "You want us to fight those bugs?" one of them said, as though the very idea was ridiculous. Even Bertrand, the most vigorous amongst them, shrunk away from Argrave's words. "No," Argrave said. "All of you would be worthless in a fight. Even a high wizard of the Order wouldn't be able to fight a colony of exocelcines easily." "Wizard, sir, and no offense to you," one of the men of the village said, stepping forward, "but we're dealing with the harvest. We need to finish harvesting the last of the crops before winter entombs us. These bugs stay to the lilies, and I see no need to stop the harvest." Argrave nodded, gritting his teeth. He stepped forward. "Have you ever dealt with rabbits, moles, perhaps, even ants? All of them surely ate your crops at some point or another." The man nodded. Argrave leaned down to the man's face. "And you learned that, when you see a rabbit, a molehill, or an ant's mound, they need to be dealt with before they spread into your crops and pick them clean. These creatures in your lily fields are much like those three, though as I'm sure you've noticed, they don't eat your crops or your lilies. If it were just that, the Count wouldn't send someone like me." Argrave straightened his back and walked around the crowd. "Right now, they nab a stray deer, or the odd couple who goes to the field without having heard the warnings. Each life they take enables them to be more. They lay eggs and multiply like any other bug. It's the lily fields now, but soon enough, cows will vanish from their pens, the fences eaten away. Your dogs and cats will vanish, not because they ran away, naturally." "We don't have cows, Sir Wizard," Bertrand interrupted. "That simplifies things," Argrave continued undisturbed. "They'll skip my preceding descriptions and head to the final step. As their colony grow more and more, their appetite will find their way to this village. They'll wear all of you away as a locust plague does a field of wheat," Argrave said grimly, turning to the crowd with a finger held out. "A death at the hands of your lily lurkers is not an easy one. Those 3 tails on their back, 2 are for sensing things, but one is a stinger that causes paralysis. They drag you back to their burrows like an ant might a peanut. Your gut will begin to rot with pestilence as you lay there, awake and conscious but unmoving. You'll turn into an easily digestible mush for the bugs and their young. It takes a week to die, and I assure you, it is not a painless thing. Argrave let his words settle into the crowd for dramatic effect. Once the crowd was riled, Argrave continued. I've heard tell of it happening overnight. The exocelsians stormed the village quietly in one line, just like an ant might. Come morning, all of the beds are stained in blood and poison, and the fields are left with no one to harvest them. Argrave finished, looking back to the man who'd initially dismissed Argrave's proposal. So, people of White Edge, you have 3 options. Argrave held up 3 gloved fingers, counting down. Abandon this place, die in this place, or help me. The work is not especially difficult, I assure you. As farmers, it may indeed come naturally to you. With his words finished, a silence took over the crowd. It was probably a lot to process, and so Argrave did not grow dispirited. He waited, watching as the people spoke amongst themselves. Retired here with the kids 30-some-odd years ago, and certainly not about to abandon it, Bertrand said enthusiastically. Some people nodded in agreement. This is White Edge. Built this place from the ground up. We did, he urged the crowd, riling them up. I'm glad to see I didn't waste my words, Argrave concluded. You should gather everyone else, catch them up to speed. My pupil and I have to prepare some things. He looked to Annalise, finding it difficult to conceal a smile in wake of his performance. How much of that was true? Annalise inquired as Argrave stowed away the lockbox inside the carriage. The only fabrications were the name and the overnight abductions, Argrave answered, ensuring things were locked tight. Those 2 little mistruths were designed to make them amenable to my guiding hand. Makes it seem like I have experience with this matter. The poison also doesn't rot your insides, but it does paralyze. Argrave locked the carriage's compartment and turned to Annalise and Gilliman behind him. If we didn't get involved, I suspect they'd just be forced from their homes. Might take years, though. But who cares? It worked. We have a temporary labor force to help gather the ingredients I need. Now, we start our experimentation. Argrave pulled his gloves tighter. I feel like a traveling scam artist. I guess I'm not doing anything wrong. Exactly. Chapter 50, Bandages. Such a cruel world, said a deep voice in lamentation. That the gods should take these hands from you. It is their test. You must stay strong. Orion wrapped a bandage around the disease-ridden hand of a farmer. The man, likely a common laborer, laid on the floor in a simple mat of blankets. His skin was bloated and waxy. Orion knelt by his side, long black hair bound in a single braid behind him. Throughout the rest of the simple warehouse, the royal knights tended to the other sick. Some of them were already showing signs of disease. Orion's hands, though, were clean of pustules or other blemishes marring the sick. Orion finished wrapping the hand. I have blessed you, good man of the realm. The disease is most likened to the pale fingers of death itself. Its dread breath cannot be reversed, only halted. Even with the blessings of the gods, until a cure is found, you must wrap your hands carefully like this every day. Bless you, Prince Orion, the man said weakly. Bless you. I am merely one of the gods' favored, good man. But we are all their children. It is my duty to protect and heal merely because I can. He stroked the man's hair like he was a child, and then stood, plate mail clanging beneath his dirtied white robes. Orion looked about the room for yet more people to tend to, but one of the royal knights stepped forward. Half of his right cheek was badly deformed by the disease, and his hands were already wrapped in bandages. Prince Orion, how much longer must we go untreated? Orion looked to the man, then reached out and caressed his cheek. The man very clearly wanted to flinch away. This plague is a test issued by the gods. Just the same, my good knight, it carries their divine will. You are servants of House Vasker assigned to me. You are an extension of my divine crook. If you accept their will, I can mold you into true scions of me, of the gods, he whispered. Oh, gods. The man said, nearly breaking down. We're going to die. The man fell to his knees. If your faith is true and your actions righteous, death will never meet you, Orion said with conviction, kneeling down. From hardship sprouts greatness. Already, you feel no pain where the god's plague has touched. Orion stared at the man's bandaged hands. When it consumes all of your body, I will give you my blessing and name you the Knights of Modder, heralds for the virtues of the goddess of plague and rot. Your flesh will be as tough as stone, and you will know neither pain nor fear. Do not despair, good knight of Vasker. Pray to Modder and her mercy. Though the people may suffer, this is your gift, Orion preached enthusiastically. You will help bring peace and prosperity to Vasker and the lands beyond it, as is your sworn duty. Did you not take an oath to give your life to the royal family? We're going to die, the royal knight said, face twisting in despair where it could. Some of it was rendered immobile from the disease. The knight looked up at Orion. You're no saint. You're a beast. A demon, he shouted. Many of the people in the ward turned to look at them. Orion's face went stiff. He stood, staring down at the man. To speak ill of a divine herald, a great sin. But mercy is divinity's tool. I forgive you for your words. If you repent, and your faith remains true, you will someday bask in the warmth of the god's love. Orion placed his hands together, eyes closed as though praying. Then, he opened his eyes and strode past the royal knight, seeking more people to tend to. "My prince," another royal knight said, walking closer and whispering. He had yet to be affected by the disease. "I apologize for Will's conduct, but I must ask. How much longer will we remain here?" "More and more refugees arrive each and every day. Nearly every single house is becoming filled with the sick. Your father the king sent for you near 2 weeks ago. All of the other princes have surely arrived by now." "My father will understand." Orion shook his head. "We will stay here until this disease has been conquered. This is my own war, of much larger scale and importance. Though the air grows cold as autumn ends and the humors in the air do not spread so easily, we must fight to stay this plague before winter passes." Orion turned to the knight. "Just as winter will stay the armies, so too will winter stay this disease. Come spring, it will sweep across the kingdom, killing multitudes more than any army might. If the gods thought my logic flawed, they would speak to me. I hear their voices ringing in my head. There is no discouragement. I cannot call myself a man of the gods should I turn my head at the dead and dying. Suffering and happiness are two sides of the same coin." Orion patted the knight on the shoulder and then strode past. The knight looked at the prince as he walked away, gaze bouncing between the door and Orion's back. Finally, his side lowered to the sword on his hip, and he pushed his tongue against his cheek, mired in thought. A senior knight walked to the other and placed his hand on the pommel of the other's sword. "Don't even consider it. Orion does not need us as guards. I suspect he could face an army naked with only a little trouble. To mutiny would be to die. He may seem mad, but he is blessed. That so few have died here is proof of that. He'd have us all succumb to this plague," the knight said angrily. "For some delusions of a knightly order to save the lives of a few peasants in the backwater." "Backwater? Some of these men and women are from the northern cities," the senior knight replied. "Most are from Belden. Allegedly, even Belden's baron has fallen ill with this disease. This plague is indeed a serious one." The senior knight turned his gaze to Orion. "Most prophets were thought to be mad before they changed the world. It may be hard to accept, but perhaps faith in him may be our best course for the future." The senior knight walked away, kneeling before someone begging for water and offering it to them. The knight cast one more glance at the door and then turned away, walking back to offer help to those ill. "No," Argrave directed, leaning forward and pulling a wooden bowl full of a plant's roots from a farmer's hands. The man held a makeshift vessel and gazed up at Argrave. "You boil these without crushing?" Argrave walked over and dumped it in an empty pot, and then conjured some water to fill it. He gave it back, and directed the man over to the fires. Everyone in the field was working at making the poisons that Argrave intended to test tonight. The previous day, Argrave had outlined the course of action he would have the villagers take. This morning had been occupied with a trek through the woods, scavenging mushrooms, roots, and flowers. Now, they were brewing enough for one test of each poison recipe Argrave could remember. He had used the excuse of testing this particular colony's resistance to each poison. Argrave felt as though he was coordinating a culinary class. Though some stubborn few refused to help, instead tending to the harvest, the vast majority within the village did. It was surprising how effective slight deviations from the truth could be. "I feel like the Pied Piper," Argrave said to Annalise a fair distance away from the working villagers. He kept his eye on their processes. "Who is that?" she asked. "Clues in the name." He played pipes, wore pied clothing. He came across a town with a rat infestation. The people hired him, and he played a little song on his magic pipe, and the rats followed him out of town. Argrave looked to Annalise. The village refused to pay him after. He played his pipe again, and instead of rats, he led their children out of town. "Where did he lead them?" she asked, intrigued. "Dunno." Argrave shook his head. "Into the sea, maybe." "Accounts vary, and I wasn't there." "This happened?" she asked concernedly. Argrave laughed. "I don't think so. It's just a little tale designed to teach morality. Guess it's in line with Vediman teachings. Never renege on a contract, or an instrumentalist will steal your children." "I must have missed that in Vedic scriptures," she said drolly, careful with a snark. "It's like a drug. Too much and you become addicted. You'll never take any conversation seriously again." She stepped in front of him and turned, crossing her arms and staring. "Like you?" "I'd call myself a responsible user," Argrave said with a contemplative nod. "Enough to take the edge off, but not enough to cease functioning in society." Annalise tilted her head. "You have a strange definition of responsible." Argrave heard the sound of something dragging against the dirt from behind and turned round. Glimmer held his bow in one hand, the other holding on to a rope slung over his shoulder. Behind, he dragged 2 dead deer along, each of their 4 legs bunched together and tied by rope. He released them and walked to Argrave. "Forest is quiet. Not a lot of game, not even small creatures. Worse near the lily fields. Had to go far to find these." Glimmer looked back. "Figures." Argrave nodded. "Any more you need to go back and retrieve?" "No." Glimmer turned to Argrave. "You need more?" Argrave pushed his tongue against his cheek as he thought. "This part is only for the testing. I think it should be fine. We need only spread them a bit thin." "I had hoped to try venison, but oh well." Argrave looked to his labor force. "I think some of the people here are hunters. You might ask them for help with the butchering." "No need," Glum dismissed. I am enough. Right, sure. Argrave put his hand to his chin. We can use just about everything. Don't even need to remove the bones. Argrave looked back to his conscripted workers. As much as I'd like to get this done quickly, I'd much prefer it be done right. Things will be calm throughout Vaska for a time, relatively speaking. But the calmer it is, the greater the tempest. Argrave said with a low voice. It's best we use our time wisely. Glum and Annalise both nodded. Argrave walked back into the crowd, overseeing their rudimentary brewing in pots and pans found throughout the village. If you like this audiobook, subscribe the channel for more videos like this. And join my Patreon if you want to support me, where you can find the complete collection Jackal Among Snakes audiobooks. Hurry up, what are you waiting for? Leave some comment and let me know if you guys like this story, or you have a web novel you like and want to hear its audiobook. I will be happy to create them for you. Please like, share, and leave a comment on the video.